in your pursuit of a goal that you care about, you are going to end up getting in a rut. In that moment, most people give up. I'm going to tell you what you need to do if you want to be part of the 8% that actually sees their goals through. If you struggle getting up and getting your day started early, even though you want to and know that you should be doing it, this comes down to two things. One, it's all mechanism all the time. What are you doing with your night routine to make sure that you're getting to bed on time? Because the reality is, if you're tired, you're not going to want to get up. The reason so many people lack motivation is because of, as Vince Lombardi said, fatigue makes cowards of us all. If you're tired, you just don't have what you need to face the day. Life is hard. Being a human is difficult. Life is going to kick you in the face. The second law of thermodynamics makes abundantly clear that life moves inextricably towards one thing: chaos. And the only way to tame the chaos and create order in your life is by pouring energy into the system. To pour that energy into the system, you need energy at two levels: at the cellular level and psychological energy. Now, it's easy enough to get yourself pumped up psychologically, but to get yourself pumped up at a cellular level, you have to make sure that you are getting to bed on time, getting plenty of sleep, eating right, and getting exercise and meditating. If you're not doing those things, then you're not going to be primed at a cellular level. Now, to get the psychological energy, we get to the second thing. You just don't want it badly enough. Most people don't want the thing that they're pursuing in their life for two reasons. Reason number one, you don't realize that desire is a process. You build desire for things. You were not born with some intense, insatiable desire. You do have imperatives that evolution has given us, but you don't have these intense desires other than like hunger, thirst, sexual drive. But you certainly don't have a drive to go to the gym. You don't have a drive to be more successful at work. That's actually only minorly true. Certainly for guys, you probably do have a pretty strong imperative to gain access to resources, but it will not direct you towards the thing that you're specifically going to pursue. So you'll have a vague sense of, I want to do more, I want to be more, I want to be admired, I want to be at the top. But the top of what? That's where people get themselves into trouble, because they lack that clarity. They lack that clarity because they don't realize that you just have to pick something that you already respond positively to naturally. You encountered it, it gave you more energy than it took, you're naturally drawn to that thing, you want to do it. Okay, but it's not going to be like, oh my God, I need to dedicate the rest of my life to this. I spring out of bed in the morning because I'm so excited about this thing. That is not how it works. You'll just be like, oh, that's cool, I dig that thing. Now, if you go put time and energy into building desire, which is basically the process of explaining to yourself why that thing matters to you. And as you repeat that in an embodied way, meaning you embody the enthusiasm for that thing that you want to feel, and you loop around it, and you actually go and get better at that and do it in the world, and people are like, oh man, that's so cool. I love that you can do that thing, and you get that positive feedback, and it was already energizing to you, and you loop around why it matters. Why am I investing in this so much? And you do that over and over in an embodied way. Now, all of a sudden, 6 months later, a year later, it really is this raging inferno at the center of your soul, something that you care about and want incredibly deeply. But you have to go down that process of gaining mastery, of really pushing yourself around why you're gonna love this thing so much. And then it actually becomes real. You become what you repeat. So if you're repeating that you're an idiot, that you don't love yourself, that will become true. Now, self-worth is a very complicated topic that is beyond the scope of this conversation, but just know that you do become what you repeat. So be very thoughtful. All right, those really are the two reasons that people are going to struggle. So you have to focus on making sure that you're getting yourself energized for this thing that you're pursuing. And then you have to make sure that mechanistically you're doing the things that you need to do so you're not tired all the time. But most people fail to get enough sleep. They go to bed with such wild swings that it's like having jet lag. Like everybody goes, oh yeah, if I traveled to the East Coast from the West Coast and I had 3 hours of jet lag, of course I'm going to be tired. Well, what do you think happens when your bedtime swings by an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours? You're going to experience that same kind of disruption in your sleep cycle. Also, people do a lot of things to have poor sleep hygiene from breathing through their mouth, taking in blue light, going to bed at different times, watching TV right before they go to bed, checking their text messages, reading emails, working on stressful things. All of this stuff are things that are going to disrupt your sleep. And the biggest one, which we haven't even talked about, how close to your bedtime do you eat food? I have roughly 7 hours between my last meal and my bedtime. And it's amazing. And I have found that if I even eat within 3 hours of going to bed, I can feel the difference. Now, 3 hours is, I would say, good. If you got 3 hours of distance between the last moment you were chewing, so not when you start the meal, the last moment you were chewing and when you go to bed, you're in pretty good shape. I think you will find that you sleep better the longer that you stretch that period out. There's, of course, also a lot of individual variability. I've heard some very interesting information around carbohydrates. And if you have your last meal has a fair amount of carbohydrates, that you will sleep better. Now, I find for me that that actually is true. If I have carbohydrates, but they're not high sugar, wear a glucose monitor, it's very enlightening. But if I have something that doesn't spike my glucose massively, so think about doing a lot of greens, things like that, leafy greens, that I actually will sleep better, but I need to have a pretty big distance still between my last meal and when I go to bed. You're gonna have to experiment with this stuff. When it comes to diet, there's so much individual variability. It's absolutely terrifying, so try it, run that. But I find that most people eat within an hour, maybe 90 minutes before they go to bed. That's gonna disrupt your sleep massively. So be very thoughtful about trying that and experimenting. Once you get all of that down and you hold yourself accountable to doing all of this stuff, then I think you're going to find getting up is very easy. But if you don't address how badly you want the thing you're getting out of bed for and your physiology, it's going to be a struggle forever. And last but not least, I'll throw in a little bonus here, and that is you have to have standards. I'm angry with myself if I don't get out of bed in 10 minutes or less. I'm angry at myself if I don't go to bed on time because I really want the things that I'm pursuing. So be really thoughtful about that. Don't do it because you ought to. Find a way to get excited about it, then build rules in your life around that. And so you're doing it because it's what you want for yourself. And so the reason that you're upset with yourself when you don't do it isn't because you're worried about disappointing other people. It's because you really want it and you're not acting in accordance with that. That's it. Get after it. If you have a goal to get up early and you find that you don't and you're feeling badly about yourself, you have to be very thoughtful about how you react in that moment. I'm a big fan of rewarding and punishing yourself, but you have to be very good at how you go about that. So when you do what you're supposed to do, of course, you want to pat yourself on the back. You want to give yourself that emotional uplift of recognizing a job well done. And when you don't, you definitely want to face square on, you said you were going to do it and you didn't do it, and that is a black mark on your day. Now, the problem is that when you continue to beat yourself up, now you're going to begin to diminish your sense of self. I advise you never do anything that diminishes your sense of self. You want to hold yourself accountable. You want to have a standard. You want to live up to it. I think that's incredibly important. And I think so many people fail to get where they want to go in life because they fail to hold themselves accountable. So you want to set a standard. You want to hold yourself accountable to that standard, but you also want to make sure that you only do and believe that which moves you towards your goals. I have a rule in my life that I only do that. I'm not trying to live in a post-truth world. This isn't me just deciding that I'm going to believe in whatever I want to believe in. In fact, I define truth as the thing that most efficiently moves you towards your goal. I think that you're most closely aligned to what is true when you're able to predict the outcome of your behaviors. And when you're able to predict the outcome of your behaviors, I think you're onto what is true. So we're not going to sit there and belittle ourselves and tear ourselves apart. We're going to acknowledge that what we did, it breaks our rule, that we had that rule in the first place because it is the set of behaviors that most effectively moves us towards our goal. So we want to get back on track because we actually care about our goal and we want to do the thing that's moving us towards our goal. We're not going to get back on track because we think we're a bad person or we're worried what the world is going to think. This all needs to be intrinsic motivation. You need to care. You need to have some reason why you want this thing so badly that you've put all these rules around yourself in the first place. All the rules that I have, the amount of work that I do, how hardcore I am, the standard that I hold myself to, rewarding myself, punishing myself, it's all in service of what I want. So make sure that you want something that is legitimately exciting to you. Make sure that you've spent the time to build that desire in yourself, and then make sure that you recognize that the most important thing that you can do to bounce back is to bounce back right away, to not beat yourself up any more than is useful to bouncing back, to getting back on track. And then when you get back on track and you say, okay, cool, this happens to me all the time. I have a rule, I get out of bed in 10 minutes or less. And sometimes, my feet will hit the floor right as it clicks over into the 11th minute. Now, I never miss it by much, but when I do, one, I confess, I tell my wife, I'll go on camera, I'll tell people, I didn't make it today. I like to hold myself accountable. And I feel good when I hold myself accountable because I'm willing to stare nakedly at my inadequacies. I didn't do it today. I said I was going to and I didn't. But my willingness to own that, to admit it, to not lie to myself, to not lie to other people, to say, hey, I didn't do it today. That act makes me feel good because I know how effective it is. I know how much I've gotten out of my life by being honest when I don't do the things that I wanted to do, by reminding myself why I want to do them, by reminding myself why I have these rules in place, and then living in accordance with that. And when I don't, to give myself that reminder that, hey, you said you were going to do it and you didn't. Not making excuses, owning everything completely, and reminding myself that my life is an exact reflection of my choices, and that I made my day a little bit worse by not doing what I said I was going to do. But at the same time, that if I just sat there and beat myself up on what a loser I am, then I'm not going to get done the things that I need to get done in order to make meaningful progress towards my goals. So I do it just enough to kick myself in the ass, and then I stop, I get back on track, I reward myself for getting back on track, and boom, it's all systems go. The most important thing that you can do to wake up early is to get your night routine on point. My night routine really begins at 2 p.m. This is all true. So what I found was the number one thing that disrupted my sleep was I would wake up in the middle of the night to pee, and then my mind would start worrying around all the problems that I have to solve, and I would be up for 2.5 hours in the middle of the night every single night. And so I was like, okay, what would I need to do in order to make sure that I never wake up to pee? And at first I thought, well, if I just stop drinking water in the late afternoons, early evening, I should be fine. That didn't work. And then I realized, this is a food problem. If I stop eating food earlier, then I can kill two birds with one stone. One, I can elongate my intermittent fasting window, which is already incredibly powerful. But two, I'm also not going to have a bunch of water being extracted from the food as I lead up to bedtime. So what I do is I have my last meal. I start eating at about 1:15. I'm usually done chewing by about 2 o'clock. Then by the time I go to bed at 9 p.m., I've had 7 hours without eating. And I don't drink. I have one sort of final sip right before I go to bed at, call it 8:50, 8:55. But from 2 to then, I don't have any water. So I'm able to sleep through the night perfectly well. I'm able to drink as much water as I need because I wake up at say 3:30 to 4:30, somewhere in there. So I'm able to get a ton of water in my system before 2 p.m. And so everything works perfectly. So that's the first thing that I start doing. The next thing I do is going to the food thing. I want to make sure that I have a minimum of 3 hours of not eating before I go to bed for reasons of digestion. So even if I didn't have the water problem, not eating, not having food in my digestion is hugely important. Now, the reason that I know that this actually makes a difference is if on the weekend I'm having a cheat meal, I can actually drink water. I don't have to stop drinking water because the carbohydrate intake will cause me to retain water, so I'm not going to have that problem even if I eat close to bedtime and keep drinking throughout the day. It's actually wonderful. I love it. I can pound water right before I go to bed. Something about water at night tastes so good. I don't have to worry about that if I've had a high carbohydrate meal. So what I found though is that even by eating, let's say 3 hours before I go to bed, I can still tell the difference in my sleep. But 3 hours is sort of that maximum where it's not truly disruptive. So no matter what, whether you have trouble with peeing at night or not, you want to make sure that starting 3 hours before you go to bed, you finished all of your food intake. That's really important. Also, 3 hours before I go to bed, I will avoid blue light. So I wear blue blocking glasses, and I make sure that my computer shifts over into night mode so that it actually turns the screen warmer colors. I dim the lights. I try not to get bright lights in my eyes. All of this stuff makes a really big difference. Also, I don't do any stressful work at least an hour before I go to bed. So even though I'll keep working up until I go to bed at 9, as I get later into the evening, I do things that are far more predictable and less stressful. So for instance, I have an episode to prepare for today. And so tonight, as I start getting ready for bed, that will be one of the last things that I do, literally right up until I go to bed. Because it's something that isn't about problem solving. It's not stressful. I'm not going to be surprised by some problem that exists in the business. Right as I'm about to go to bed, I realize, huge spike of adrenaline and cortisol because, oh my God, I just realized we have some problem that needs to be solved. So it's something that's based around learning. It's usually exciting. It puts my brain in a different mode. And so that is really useful to helping me begin to move my brain out of problem-solving mode and get into a mode that's going to allow me to fall asleep. Also, I tend to 30 to 40 minutes before I fall asleep, I'll get into bed. Now, I know a lot of people say don't take work to bed with you. I have not found that to be problematic at all, as long as it's a certain type of work, like doing research is my go-to for being in bed so I can really begin to relax and calm down. I will also, if I've had a particularly stressful day, in that last hour, I might do some meditation to really make sure that I'm calming myself down. And then, right as I'm about to lay in bed, and this is the one thing that I'm conflicted about recommending to people, is I put headphones in and I begin reading a book right as I go to bed. So as I lay down to fall asleep, I put headphones in and I put a book on. I've used fiction in the past. I'm using nonfiction currently, but it's a certain type of book. One, it's a very long book. So often biographies about a moment in time or a given person. I guess technically a biography is about a person, or a moment in time. And the books often are like 20 hours, 30 hours. So you know that you're not going to get woken up in the middle of the night by the book ending, which has happened to me, unfortunately, with shorter books. And so I will listen to those books. They're not where I'm trying to learn something. So it's just something that's interesting. And that puts my brain into a certain zone, and I tend to fall asleep very quickly. I'm talking like 5 minutes quickly or less. I'll wake up in the middle of the night and I'll rewind the book back to a part that makes sense. But because it's such a big topic, it tends to be something where, whether I get exactly to where I was or not, I can still get the gist. It's not like a story where, man, if you miss anything, you're going to be completely lost. What happened? It's disorienting. So that has been really, really useful. And then the last thing that I do is I tape my mouth closed, because if you breathe through your nose, it can actually dry out your throat, disrupt your sleep. There's a whole book on this called Breathe by James Nestor, if I'm remembering correctly. And it's really been transformative to my sleep, because I used to wake up with a dry throat and it would pull me out of sleep, and you're lip smacking, you need like something to drink. It's terrible. So by taping my mouth, I'm able to sleep through the night much better. It really was a game changer. I highly recommend that you guys try not only that, but all of the things that I just talked about. I think that they will radically improve your sleep hygiene, which will allow you to sleep much better. You will be far more rested and able to get to the holy grail, which is not setting an alarm, so you wake up naturally right at the perfect part of your sleep cycle, having gotten as much sleep as your body needs. If you find that despite having really good sleep hygiene, that you're still getting tired later in the day, a lot of people wonder if they can take a nap or if they should avoid it. And to be honest, I think that it's completely up to the person. There are some times where I'm so tired that if I don't allow myself to at least completely let go, meaning I lay down, I close my eyes, and I give myself permission to sleep, I can't focus, I can't concentrate. And I have found that sometimes even just letting myself go like that, even though I don't fall asleep for 10 or 15 minutes, can be extremely rejuvenating. Other times, I find that falling asleep for 10 or 15 minutes is completely rejuvenating. And other times, I have no idea why, I feel super groggy, and even sleeping for an hour may make me feel worse than just staying awake. That's always super bizarre, where you lay down, you don't set an alarm, you just give yourself permission to sleep as long as you need. You wake up, one would think that you got a full sleep cycle, but for whatever reason, man, when I wake up, I'm like, God, I just feel awful. I feel sluggish, I have a little bit of a headache, just the whole rest of the day, I feel off. So to be honest, it's pretty rare that I take a nap. Even times where, because if I get 5 hours of sleep, that I hate that. I can get by if it's one day, but I really, really, really don't like doing it. I would much rather get 6 hours. 6 hours is magical. 7 is unbeatable. So if I've gotten 5, I will give myself the chance to lay down and take a nap. But I often find that it's like, man, the whole rest of the day just never feels like I quite get back on. And if I've gotten 5 hours of sleep, the only time I will give myself a chance to take a nap is before 7 a.m. so that I'm still getting that sleep early. The sun typically for most of the year is still down. And so I'm able to sleep while it's still dark. Because remember, if I only got 5 hours of sleep, chances are I woke up around 2:30-ish. So I can, by that point, I have gone, worked out, I've started working for a few hours, and then I find that just wave of fatigue really hitting me. Then I will lay down. But if the sun is up and my day is going, the odds of me taking a nap are virtually zero. Again, there's a lot of self-experimentation that you should do. Figure out what works for you, learning those rhythms, figuring out what are the times, like can you notice a pattern when you end up getting sleepy and are unable to bounce back? For me, it's like if the day is really going and the sun is up, and if I've had caffeine or anything like that, the odds of me feeling better after I take a nap are very, very low. But this really is something that you should experiment with, because there are going to be times where you may have gotten so little sleep that the only way to function is to get that rest, is to allow yourself to lay down and take a nap. So I certainly don't have any moral judgments on taking a nap. I think some people do. I don't. Like, for one, if I'm flying, there's something about flying. If I'm flying and I'm just like, I cannot keep my eyes open, I'm like, I'll take a nap. I've heard people like, oh my God, like I'd never take a nap. That's crazy to me. You want to cognitively optimize. You want to make sure that you are performing at your best. And if taking a nap is going to be the thing that lets you perform at your best, then take the nap. You're far better to, if you, let's say you're going to work for 3 hours, you're far better, or you have 3 hours to work, I should say. You're far better napping for an hour and a half and being really sharp that last hour and a half than you are just like struggling through, not being at your best and trying to get something done. Now, everything is on balance. I work so hard. I leave everything out on the field. I just don't think twice about taking a nap if that's what I need, because I know that I'm not doing it out of laziness. And I think that's where a lot of people get conflicted, is they know that taking the nap is something that they do as a way to avoid doing the work, and that they do that kind of thing a lot, and that they probably were feeling tired because they stayed up too late watching something on Netflix or playing video games or hanging out, whatever, or they had a few too many drinks. They've done something dumb that is counter to the goals. If those things are your goals, by all means do them. I don't pass any moral judgment on watching Netflix, playing video games, get as drunk as you want, if that's your goal. But if it's not your goal and you did those things, something tells me that now you're beating yourself up over being lazy, and part of the reason that you don't want to take the nap is because you feel guilty. If you play all out all the time and you know that you've earned that respect with yourself, then taking a nap is a no-brainer if that's going to be the thing that cognitively optimizes you. Just a reminder, PSA, enjoy your life. And if taking a nap is going to let you enjoy it, do it. If it doesn't and it's going to mess up your rhythm, then don't. Just grind it out. If you let me control your life for the next 7 days, here is exactly what I would have you do. I'm actually thinking about turning this into a challenge because I think that this would be amazingly impactful for people, and it goes like this. Our goal is to get up early and really attack the day so that we can get a lot of momentum going so that we can outperform other people. Remember, I am super competitive when it comes to doing the things that I most want in life. Now, I do that from a place of joy and abundance. I think everybody can have what they want, but it's actually fun to go hard, to compete against other people and really see how far you can push your life. All right, it goes like this. This is the ultimate life routine. Number 1, we're going to go to bed at 9 p.m. like it's a religion, no ifs, ands, or buts. And we're going to As you see, as we go through the day when we wake up, we're going to do a lot of things to make sure that we are ready for bed at 9 p.m. But we go to bed at 9 p.m. like it's a religion. We do not set an alarm clock. You can have an emergency alarm clock if you've got a meeting or a flight to catch or something like that, so that you just don't have it on your mind. Because I know some people are so paranoid they're going to oversleep, it actually interrupts their sleep. By all means, set an emergency alarm. But the goal would be to have at least 9 hours before our emergency alarm would have to go off. Most people are not going to sleep for 9 hours unless they've been chronically sleep deprived. So no alarm. Go to bed at 9 or 8 if you have kids, or 7 if you have kids, whatever. But we're going to go to bed early enough that we don't need to set an alarm. For me, that's 9. You're going to go to bed at that time. You're going to wake up when you wake up. You get out of bed in 10 minutes or less. Your feet are on the floor. Next to your bed is your gym clothes. You're going to put your gym clothes on immediately. You don't have to go to the gym. You can work out at home. I don't care. We can do all body weight workouts, or we can go to the gym and go ham. Whatever works for you. But we are going to work out. We are going to get our blood pumping. No one, and I mean no one, hates going to the gym more than me. Whatever the endorphin rush is that other people get, I don't get. But it does allow me to cognitively optimize. If you haven't read the book Spark, read it. Studies show that if you have a hard problem to solve, you want to tackle that hard problem immediately after working out. They did all these crazy studies where they had kids go in and do like these incredibly hard workouts where your grade was based on your heart rate. So it was like you didn't have to run a mile in under 6 minutes, but you had to get your heart rate up to whatever, 140, 150, and maintain that for, I forget how long, let's call it 15, 20 minutes. And then if they had their hardest class immediately following that, so for me it would have been like calculus. If I had had that immediately following gym class where I got my heart rate up into that ideal zone, I would perform better there because you're cognitively optimizing. So I'm going to work out. I'm going to get my heart rate up. That is key. I'm also going to be intermittent fasting. So we're going to get to when I clock that change, but I'm not going to eat before I work out. So I'm going to work out fasted. Then I'm going to go and I'm going to meditate. By the way, I work out for about 30 to 45 minutes. By all means, work out longer. I wouldn't work out a lot shorter. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to meditate. I'm going to meditate for about 20 minutes. I'm trying to get myself into a place where I'm completely relaxed. No stress, no anxiety. It is very possible, no matter what is going on in your life, to get to the point where you have no stress, no anxiety. Now, if you're really going through something and the thought of trying to sit down and meditate is just unbelievably torturous, give yourself 7 minutes of doom scrolling cats. It will put your brain in a certain place. It's very interesting. It is the art of distraction. There is a reason from an evolutionary standpoint that distraction exists. Go for it. 7 minutes only. At the end of the 7 minutes, then we're going to go into meditation. And you're going to meditate. If you did 7 minutes of doom scrolling cats and you just don't have extra time, fine. 13 minutes of meditation, so be it. But I think you're better off making it 27 minutes, 7 minutes doom scrolling cats, and then 20 minutes of meditation. The goal of meditation is to just breathe. You're not trying to have any grand epiphanies. You're just trying to breathe. Your mind is going to wander like crazy, and it's going to happen a lot, to the point where it's going to distress you and you're going to think you're doing something wrong. You are not. The whole point is to just come back to the breath. Come back to the breath. Back to the breath. Back to the breath. Getting yourself in that calm, creative state, no stress, no anxiety, lengthening the period of time where you can focus on the breath. Incredibly powerful. Now, if you haven't done this for an extended period of time yet, the next thing I want you to do is take a cold shower. We're doing all of this to accomplish 2 goals. You can reboot your life, your health, even your career, anything you want. All you need is discipline. I can teach you the tactics that I learned while growing a billion-dollar business that will allow you to see your goals through. Whether you want better health, stronger relationships, a more successful career, any of that is possible with the mindset and business programs in Impact Theory University. Join the thousands of students who have already accomplished amazing things. Tap now for a free trial and get started today. Toughen up, Buttercup, and cognitively optimize. So working out, as much as it's good for the brain, it's also to show you that you can do hard things, because in your life, you need to be doing hard things. The other hard thing that you're going to do that's also good for your brain and good for a whole host of other things, including anti-inflammatory, getting all the effects of longevity that come from cold exposure, you're going to get in the cold shower. Now, the amount of time you need to stay in the cold shower is going to depend on the time of year and where you live. Because let me tell you, Minnesota in February is very different than LA in August. The cold temperature in LA in August, not that cold. So, and compared to, and I've actually done this, was it in Minnesota? No, it was Chicago. I did Chicago in the winter. I can't remember exactly what month. And the water hitting my forehead gave me a headache. I was like, damn, this is a whole nother level of cold. So doing that versus in LA was a world of difference. But in LA, I would keep myself in the shower. I think my record was like, oh God, it was somewhere between 12 and 17 minutes. I can't remember. But for, 13 months? I did this every single shower. No weekend, actually that might be a lie. Every shower Monday through Friday, that's correct. I think on the weekends I allowed myself a warm shower. Don't hold me to that, I can't remember. But for 13 months, I took so many cold showers, it was horrifying. In fact, I stopped. I promised myself I'd do it for 30 days. I did it for 13 months. I began to resent my shower. But it is extremely powerful for doing things that are difficult. So we're going to do the cold challenge. Expose yourself for the cold as long as you can possibly bear. Extend that period of time. You should be shivering before you get out of the shower, like uncontrollably shivering. That is a good way of knowing if you've been in long enough. Now, again, in Minnesota, in February, it's going to happen a lot faster than a warm climate later in the year. But get cold exposure. After that, we're going to go to our important things list, and we're going to work our way down the most important things that we could be doing in order to make meaningful progress towards our goals. Once we finish all of that, I know you're going to have to do a lot of work to pay bills and all that good stuff. Fair enough. Go do your job, crush it. Then we're going to get into the intermittent fasting zone. So there are two ways to handle this. Way number one is that you can stop eating really early and then you're going to eat breakfast, or you can stop eating a little bit later, call it 5, 6 o'clock at night, but then you can't have your first meal until much later the next day. The rule of thumb is 16 hours of fasting is about right. I try to push that to, on average, about 17 and a half hours when averaged over a full week. But during the week, that tends to mean that I'm not having a meal for about 18 to 19 hours. And then on the weekend, it's closer to 15, 16 hours. So I tracked that over a year and a half, and that's what it came out to be on average. If you do all of those things, your life will be unrecognizable. And I hope that if you do that for 7 days, that you're not going to want to quit, because it really will transform your entire life. Once you get initially started in the pursuit of your goal of trying to improve yourself and become something more, something better, the key is consistency and follow through. Consistency and follow through. You become what you repeat. The reason that anybody successful becomes successful is because, to quote Winston Churchill, they can go from failure to failure without a loss of enthusiasm. The problem is the human animal has chosen a tactic of using culture in order to have generational progress. So a horse will come out doing all the things that a horse can do in 20 minutes, but horse culture doesn't progress because they come hardwired with everything, and they have for thousands of years, and they make no progress. Whereas humans, a generation 10,000 years ago invented the wheel, and we're all still using it now. But in taking that strategy, what ends up happening is that you really do become the thing that you repeat, the thing that you do consistently. And if you begin slacking off of that, then you don't end up making that progress. You certainly can't maintain that progress. So you have to be very, very thoughtful about what you repeat, because it is going to have a profound impact on your life. Now, the vast majority of people end up just breaking. They end up quitting. The reason that I've had the kind of success that I've had in my life is simply because I understand that iteration is how we make cultural progress. It's what I call the physics of progress. Most people, when they're running the physics of progress, when they get to the point where they have to evaluate their results, they end up lying to themselves and making it somebody else's fault. Now, the physics of progress are really simple. It's the scientific method recontextualized for whatever goal you're trying to achieve. And it goes like this. You come up with a hypothesis. If you have information that can inform that hypothesis, that is much better. But if you don't, when you're beginning, call it your best guess. You're taking your best guess as how you go from where you are to achieving your goal. There is inevitably going to be an obstacle in your way, and your best guess is about what do I need to do to overcome that obstacle to make meaningful progress towards my goal. Then you're going to turn that hypothesis into something that you can actually do. Then you're going to actually go do that thing, and then you're going to get a result from that thing. It is almost certainly going to fail to some extent, which is fine, because failure is the most information-rich data stream on planet Earth, but you have to learn from the failure. To learn from the failure, you have to be willing to admit that you made one. Most people will not admit that they made a mistake, and so they get stuck at that level. And in that moment, they say, it was the world. It's because I was born in the wrong time. My parents were dumb. The world doesn't want somebody who looks like me to succeed. Whatever excuse they use to make it somebody else's fault. Now, remember, the most terrifying thing about excuses is that they are valid. I'm not saying that those things aren't real. I'm not saying that the world isn't trying to hold some people back. I'm just saying it doesn't matter. You have to overcome it no matter what. So in the moment where you tried this thing and it didn't work, don't spend your time and energy focusing on how something else stopped you. Even though I will grant you, it's true. The world is trying to stop everybody from doing everything. It just is the reality. Accomplishing something meaningful is freakishly difficult. So don't focus on that it's more difficult for you. It just doesn't matter. You're just going to have to work harder. You either want to accomplish that thing in your life or you don't, and you're going to give up. That's the reality. The people that get what they want are the people that absolutely demand that they're going to keep going until they get that thing. So in that moment, when you're very tempted to focus on how other things have stopped you, you're not going to. What you need to do is be consistent. So in that moment, you're going to say, what could I have done differently to get a better result? And that's when the physics of progress loops. Now you come up with a more informed hypothesis. You learned your lesson. You figure out what you need to do that's going to be a little bit better than last time. You turn that into a thing that you can do. You do that thing. It will fail to some extent. You stare nakedly at your inadequacies. You figure out what you need to do to make it a little bit better. And the process begins again. That is why you have to be consistent. But the reality is that most people break. Most people cannot go from failure to failure without a loss of enthusiasm. They end up breaking. They end up thinking that either there's something wrong with them or that the world is against them. And because they don't want to deal with the pain and suffering of having to face their own inadequacies, or they give up because they just think that the world is against them, they don't make progress because you have to be able to fail a lot to learn from those failures. If I'm right that humans as a species have chosen culture as the learning mechanism, then you have to run the loop that culture demands, which is to try something, it fails, you iterate and you get better. That works at the societal level over millennia, and it works at the individual level in an acute thing where you just have to figure out why didn't that work and keep going. But the truth is, difficulty, boredom, struggle, pain breaks almost everyone that it touches. And I will remind us all, 92% of people fail to achieve the goal they set for themselves. And the reason is that all of that difficulty just stops people because they don't have the right mindset. They don't realize that they need to fail. They don't realize that failure does not make them a failure. So you're going to have a ton of failure in your life. You have to contextualize it as the most advantageous thing that could happen to you. So when I fail, it stings, it sucks, I hate it. I want everything that I do to work the first time, and I want to make maximum progress as fast as humanly possible. But once I realize that just isn't the way that things work, and even people like Elon Musk, who I think are abnormally intelligent, they realize, I have to fail a lot. I have to try things and see what works and what didn't. There is no way around being in the messy middle. There's no way to think or hypothesize your way to what's going to work the best. You have to get in there and try things. Even somebody that's thinking philosophically has to be able to get in there and battle their ideas and take their ideas out to other people. Even Einstein went out and made sure that his ideas were battle tested, not only through experimental physicists, but also just his friends that were other people that were able to beat up his ideas and poke holes in them. And if you're not willing to put your ideas to the test, if you're not willing to try things and see what fails, then you will forever be stuck thinking and not making any progress. You really want to be a doing machine, somebody that's out there trying. But that means that you have to risk embarrassment. And embarrassment is one of the things that destroys so many goals because people don't want to admit that they were struggling. People don't want to admit that they were having a hard time. And so they either don't tell people about the goal, which is a huge mistake. You want to tell as many people as you can. It's part of the process of building desire. You want to tell people, I'm going to do this thing and it really matters to me and I'm going to accomplish it by this date. Now all eyes are on you. But that's one of the ways you're going to stick to what you're doing. And if the whole point is that you have to repeat, be resilient, be gritty, stick with it, try, fail, over and over and over as you get better at overcoming those obstacles, then you have to be willing to push through all of that difficulty, to know why you're doing the things you're doing, and to understand that that's just the process. So guys, I'm telling you, if you really want to achieve something absolutely powerful in your life, you've got to be persistent. If you haven't already, be sure to read the book Grit by Angela Duckworth. It's an amazing expose on how to be gritty if you're not already. The process that I use for achieving my goals is really simple. First and foremost, you want to make sure that you cognitively optimize. I cannot stress that enough. So much of my life is about doing things to make sure that my brain is working well. They look like this. Number one, get sleep. Do not use an alarm. Most people set an alarm. Stop. I built 3 multi-million-dollar companies, one of those being a billion-dollar company, all without setting an alarm. Do I occasionally set an emergency alarm for something like a 4 a.m. flight? Yes. But for the most part, I don't use an alarm. I'm talking like 99% of my days, I do not set an alarm. I want to make sure that I get all of the sleep that my body needs. Why? Because I'm able to be more efficient. People mistake grinding around the clock and becoming less efficient because they're tired with actually getting more done. What you want to do is make sure that you have a very high output of achievement per waking hour. So I check in with myself about every 3 hours to make sure that I'm being productive. If you're not being productive, nothing else matters. So go to bed early. I go to bed at 9 p.m. I don't use an alarm. I typically sleep 6 to 7 hours. That's changed. If you've heard other content where I say 5 to 6 hours, right now I'm in a cycle where I'm sleeping closer to my average is probably just under 7 hours. So I never know what that's going to be. It tends to be regulated by the amount of stress in my life. So I'm getting roughly 7 hours of sleep. So that means that if I go to bed at 9 p.m., I'm up at 4 a.m. I have a rule in my life that if I'm awake Monday through Friday, I'm either working or working out. I give myself only 10 minutes to get out of bed. Why? Because I struggle to get out of bed. Just is a thing. It's always been a thing for me. From the time I was a kid, my dad would have to drag me out of bed in the morning to there was a period in my early to mid 20s where I was laying in bed 4 to 5 hours a day and just could not bear to get out of bed. It's absolutely ridiculous. Even I am completely scandalized by the reality that to this day, despite all of the things that I've accomplished, I have to fight myself just to get out of bed. So that's a reality. I accept that. So I gave myself a rule that I had to be out of bed in 10 minutes or less. Right next to my bed, I keep headphones. So I put my headphones on. I begin researching the second I wake up. So I'm researching, technically, this gets into a long thing. Right now I'm in a phase where I actually read while I sleep. Long story. I don't think you get things subliminally. That's not that, but I do find that it helps me stay asleep. I don't necessarily recommend that for everybody, but just by way of being completely transparent in terms of what my routine looks like for achieving my goals. From the second I wake up, I am researching something that matters to me. I immediately put on my gym clothes. I head to the gym right away. I work out. I then meditate. After I meditate, I do something I call thinkitating. The reason that I do these two things, one, meditation is a good way to get your stress and your anxiety down to zero. The reason you want to do this is cognitive optimization. If you are feeling frantic, if you are constantly in fight or flight, your brain is not going to function as well as it could. What is happening when you go into fight or flight is the blood is literally leaving your prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is the seat of higher level cognition. It's where you future plan. It's where you maintain your discipline. And so when you're in that fight or flight stage, you don't have the blood in the prefrontal cortex in the way that you need to, which is why people end up cheating on their diet. It's why they end up not sticking with their goals and persevering. So you want to make sure that you're taking the time to meditate, to lower your stress, lower your anxiety. And then there's a hidden benefit to meditation, which is why I follow that sort of almost seamlessly into thinkitation, which is where I stay in that meditative posture. I keep my meditative breathing going. I'm staying in that cognitive space because when you are meditating, if you're just coming back to the breath, very simple practice. My meditation practice is dead simple. It's literally what I call just breathe. So as my mind wanders, I remind myself to come back to the breath, to just breathe. My mind wanders again, back to the breath, wanders, back to the breath, wanders, back to the breath. It's tragic how rapidly my brain begins to wander, but I just keep bringing it back. Now, when I do that enough, I get into a calm and creative state. When I'm in a calm and creative state, unique areas of my brain begin to talk to each other. And so I will come up with very interesting solutions to problems that I won't get when I'm not in that state. So this is why people will often say, I need to sleep on that problem, because your brain goes through that cycle that's very much like a meditative state as you're falling asleep and then waking up again. You pass through a very similar state. So I will call that calm and creative. So once I'm in that calm and creative state, now I begin to get I give myself a problem to solve before I sit down to meditate. So I know what I'm working on. It's tied to my important things, which we'll get to in a minute. But I sit there and I know what the problem is going to be that I'm going to start working on when I'm in that calm and creative state. And then I'll allow myself to take notes as interesting ideas come up. I'm going to journal on that, which I would not do during the meditative part where I'm just coming back to the breath, back to the breath, back to the breath. And I do that for as long as I need to get to zero stress, zero anxiety, calm, creative. Once I'm there, maybe 5 minutes, maybe 20 minutes, maybe 45 minutes if I'm really stressed out. But once I'm there, then I move over into thinkitation and I begin noodling on those hard problems. Once I finish that, then I'm going to go into my important things. Now, how do I know when to stop thinkitating and move on to important things? I have found that at some point I begin running out of really fruitful, novel ideas. And once I feel like I'm kind of trying to force it, then I'm like, all right, let's just now move into executing on my important things. So now that I'm in my important things, which is a list that I keep constantly maintained, so I know what the top things are that I should be working on, so I'm not spending that time thinking about what I should be doing, I just go straight into execution mode. So then I start going down the list, doing them in order. Now, the way to execute on something is very much in order. So first thing, you're going to do everything on that thing that you can do until you've pushed it as far as you can go. And now you're waiting on other people. And then you're going to move on to the next thing. You're going to do everything that you can on that until you're waiting on other people. And then you're going to push it off, so on and so forth, down your list. Now, my important things list is predicated on my goals. So the very important thing to understand about the nature of goals is that they make demands. If you want to win a championship in swimming, then you need to do the things that a swimmer trying to win a gold medal by a certain date would need to do. It's going to dictate how you eat, how you sleep, how you train, who you talk to, how you think, all of that stuff. And so you have to, one, get good at identifying what your goals demand. And then two, you have to be good at actually sticking to the things your goals demand, which this is where most people fall down because it gets boring, it gets difficult. So you've got to be able to push through. All right, so I work my way down my important things list. Once I finish doing that, then because I'm the CEO of a company, at that point, then I'm going to begin to engage with my team. I'm usually working for about 4 to 5 hours on the things that I know that I should be doing to have the highest, most efficient impact on the company. And then, because I know a big part of my job is orchestrating people, making sure that they're focused on the things that they should be, answering questions and the like, then I go and I engage with the company. And then I take meetings based on what's important and how time aligns. It just is what it is. I take meetings until 6 p.m. I try to cut off. There's one meeting that I have a week because we're dealing with a company in China that goes until 7:30. At 7:30, It's only one day a week that I do that. Most of the time, my last meeting ends at 6. And then for the rest of the time, for the next 3 hours, I go back into my mode of controlling my time, making sure that I'm working on things that I need to do, including making sure that my important things list is up to date and that I'm working on all the loose ends for the day to make sure that everybody has what they need to start the next day, all that good stuff, which gives me the ability in the morning to take advantage of my peak cognitive ability. Now, one of the reasons that I've ended up structuring my day like that is because I found that in the morning, I'm super sharp. I've got these creative ideas. I'm able to really make progress, create space for myself. Whereas in the evenings, I'm a little bit slower. I'm not quite as efficient as I am early in the day. And so it remains easy for me to be reactive, but it's much harder for me to be proactive. That's just me. Maybe you're the complete opposite. Structure your day around you. So in the evenings, I can remain very useful as I respond to people's questions and things like that, as I comb over my important things list. All of those things I find much easier to do in the evenings. And then the last hour before I go to bed, whenever I can, and this unfortunately breaks apart sometimes, but whenever I can, I want that last hour to be work, but to be something I'm really excited about. Now, you want to be very thoughtful about how you structure your life because you should love what you're working on. Now, I know that that can be very difficult as somebody who has at periods in my life absolutely hated my job. I completely understand, but you want to push yourself to get to the point where you at least have a part of your job that you absolutely love. So that's how I spend that last hour of my day, is only working on, when I can, something that I'm really excited about. And that helps combat fatigue, and it also helps me get ready for bed, because you don't want to be dealing with something super stressful as you're getting ready for bed. And another thing that I do just by way of sleep hygiene is that I make sure that I am not getting blue light into my eyes towards the evenings. I think that's very important. So starting 3 hours before I go to bed, I'm wearing blue blocking glasses. My computer is set to go into night mode. So at sunrise, the blue light comes back on, and at sunset, the blue light turns off. I think that kind of thing can be very advantageous. As for my diet, which is another key part of cognitively optimizing, I do intermittent fasting 7 days a week, 365 days a year, including Christmas Day. And I do that because it makes me feel better. So it's not even for vanity or to be cool. It's just I feel better when I do that. So I track this for about 18 months every day. And it averaged 17 hours, including weekends, holidays, and all that. So there are, of course, times where that window is more narrow, but the least I knowingly go to is 14 hours. So that's the least amount of time that I'll go between my last meal and my first meal the next day. Like I said, even on a Christmas day or something like that, I'm going to have at least a 14-hour window. Again, just to protect my stomach and make sure that I feel great. And that will, on the weekdays, mean that I'll go sometimes 18, 19, sometimes 20 hours without a meal before I eat. And I eat my last meal at about 2 p.m., sometimes a little before, sometimes a little after, but that's roughly there. And then I don't have my next meal till 8, 9, sometimes 10, 11 o'clock. So that is my process. And I think that there's a lot of things that virtually everybody could use from that to build a very effective process. If you want to really make progress in your life, one of the keys is going to be to track that process. Now, the way to think about getting better is you want to get incrementally better. The problem is, if you're trying to get incrementally better, you're basically going to stand still. So you want to be asking the famous question that Peter Thiel asked, which is, how do I make my 10-year plan happen in the next 6 months? When you start thinking like that, it really does shift your thinking into having a radically different approach. I think one of the big problems that people have when they're trying to make progress is they set a goal that's quote unquote realistic. And when it's realistic, it's not very exciting. I teach a whole class on the process of setting goals. And one of the things that I tell people is you have to set goals that are exciting. There's a whole bunch of research on this that shows the people that are most likely to stick with their goals are the people that set a goal that is truly exciting to them. The goals that are going to be exciting are going to be big goals. That's just the way the human mind is wired. I'm telling you right now, there is an evolutionary imperative that has been embedded in your brain, and there's no way around it, that demands that you do hard things. I think from an evolutionary perspective, that makes sense because staying alive was hard. And if we didn't get an intrinsic emotional reward from doing hard things, we would have died out. So we are all the ancestors of people that got off a little bit on doing hard things. So when you don't do hard things, you don't get that positive feedback loop. You feel a sense of dis-ease. And so many people have that sense of unease, and they think that I need to go retire and my life needs to be more relaxed. I need to be on a beach somewhere. This all sucks. It's not true at all. I'm telling you right now, the thing that you need to do is find meaning and purpose and go after it. Go after it in a big way. Set yourself a crazy goal that you really believe in, that you really think life would be better if I do this thing, if I achieve this. And even if I fail, man, I would have spent my life well trying to contribute to that. If you build your life around that and go all out, man, trying to make something that you really believe in come true, to bend the world to your will, to close your eyes and imagine a world that is better than this one, open your eyes and then execute to make that world come true, you will love your life. That's the key, to find something that you really believe in and then go all out after it. Now, to track all of this progress, you really do want to be journaling, writing things down, checking things off. How many days did you stick to what you said you were going to do? This can be such an amazing way to gamify your own life, is to just have a calendar, digital or physical. Go through and mark off the day. Did you do what you said you were going to do? Yes or no? And then tally up for the week, for the month, for the year. What percentage of days did I do what I said I was going to do? Now, in this moment, you can lie. 100% you can lie. But if you lie, when you look at that calendar, you're not going to feel the way you want to feel. You're going to feel like a liar. You're going to know that you're a fraud. The whole idea is to feel a certain way when you look at that calendar. To be like, I did the thing that I said I was going to do, and I feel really awesome about that. So it is truly one of those things. The only person that you're going to cheat if you're lying about this is yourself. So come up with whatever way you can to track this stuff, whether it's a spreadsheet, whether it's checking things off in a calendar. If I'm completely honest about what I do, I check in with myself every 3 hours. I don't keep a written tally. But I do reward myself emotionally whenever I do the thing I said I was going to do. So the first one for me is, did I get out of bed in 10 minutes or less? If I did, I get to feel good about myself. If I didn't, two things happen. One, I don't get to feel good about myself, and I give myself that jab in the ribs of, you said you were going to do it and you did not do it. And then number two, I will confess to my wife or here to the community out there that I didn't do that day. I didn't meet my goal. And so by checking in with myself in real time, I'm able to see. The other is, when you're setting goals, it is absolutely critical that all of your goals have a metric associated with them so that you know the exact metric that you want to hit, so you know if you're making progress. So often when people get into the physics of progress, they didn't set a metric by which they're going to judge their goal, so they don't actually know if they're making progress. You want your goals to be specific. You want your goals to have metrics. The reason that I emphasize that so much is most people avoid metrics, they avoid dates, they avoid those specifics because then they and others will know if they're actually making progress. If you don't want the specifics, it means you're not actually interested in the actual progress. You're interested in the fiction of feeling better about yourself by saying that you have this really cool goal. And so one of the things that I'm constantly checking with myself is, did I live up to the rhetoric, meaning, oh, I'm telling people I want to do this cool thing? Or did I actually show up and play to win? Did I leave it all out on the field? So do not think that rhetoric is actual achievement. Talking about something is nothing. Did you actually make progress? And to be honest, even trying, even though I actually do think, and this is complex, but I actually do think you should emotionally reward yourself only for the sincere pursuit. But when you're thinking about tracking progress, you need to be naked and raw about whether you're actually making progress. Now, the reason it's so important to do that is if you're not making progress, you need to adjust. This goes back to the physics of progress. You're staring nakedly at your inadequacies. You're asking, what could I have done differently to get a better result? And if in that moment you don't have a metric to judge yourself against, you don't know how to better inform your next hypothesis. So the goal of trying something is to learn something that gives you a better thing to do. And when you do that, you make more meaningful progress. And when you don't make that meaningful progress, you need to understand why. But it really does come down to what gets measured gets improved. What gets measured gets improved. If you don't have the measurement, you won't know whether you're making progress. You won't have the emotional sting that you need to force yourself to actually dig in and figure this out. So gamify and make sure that you have metrics. You do those two things and you will make massive progress. If you want to know if you're setting the bar too high or too low when it comes to goal setting, I will just tell you this right now. You're setting the bar too low. Everybody's setting the bar too low. If you think about the crazy things that people have accomplished, whether it's I think it's 64 years or something, we went from the Wright brothers flying a plane for the first time to landing on the moon. 64 years. That's an impossibly small amount of time to think that somebody would have been alive at the time. Like you could have been 20 at the time the Wright brothers flown and said, we're going to go to the moon by the time I'm 85 and been right. But imagine how many people would have told you that you were out of your mind. There is so much literature on this. It's just beyond reproach. The people that set the most aggressive goals are the ones that end up achieving their goals. Now, the reason is, because there is complexity here, the reason is that it gets you excited enough to go out and pursue this thing, to be able to attract other people to your goal. That's a huge thing that you're going to learn. If you have a goal that's really exciting, and when people think about getting meaning and purpose in their life, and they think about, oh my God, I could be a part of a team that takes us to the moon, or I could be a part of a team that terraforms Mars, or I could be a part of a team that ends world hunger or deals with climate change. Whatever the thing is, it gets you excited. When it is a gigantic goal, it actually motivates people. Now, you also, the people that achieve their goals, have a path to getting there. So it can't be a pipe dream. You have to actually know how you're going to march towards that thing. And if it's a business, you need to know how you're going to generate revenue all along the way. It is incredibly difficult, but you do want to make sure that you're setting a bar that is within the realm of physics. You don't want to be throwing something so far into the trees that it is literally impossible. If you have to invalidate the laws of physics, I will tell you that that's not very interesting. And then one thing that you want to also think through is it something that you could achieve in your lifetime? And if it's not something you could achieve in your lifetime, are you okay being somebody that's going to lay a brick towards building that thing? And there's that old adage that you want to plant trees under whose shade you will never sit. So there is very many honorable things that people could do that they're not going to reap the ultimate benefits of, that they understand that they're only going to be one brick in that wall. Think about all the people that have given their entire professional careers to solving cancer, which remains unsolved. Countless amazing, brilliant minds have given themselves over to that completely, knowing all they're going to do is lay one brick in what will ultimately be the building that is that solution. But be honest, think about that, but make sure that you have a path to get there. That's the key. It's got to be exciting and you've got to see a path. But you want to make sure that you're really going after something that's going to inspire you for the long run. Because remember, the reason that most people quit is because they are broken by how boring and difficult things get. So when you ask yourself, in the grips of that difficulty, that suffering that comes along with pursuing a goal you actually care about, you are going to ask yourself, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? And if the answer isn't compelling, you're going to quit. So make sure that you come up with a goal that's big enough that when you ask why, you know exactly why, and you'll keep pushing. It's inevitable when you're pursuing your goals that you're going to find yourself in a rut and you are not going to want to stick to what you're doing. The most important thing is to identify, is this a pattern in your life? So many people love the beginning of something. They love that excitement, that initial fascination when everything is new and it just feels limitless and everything feels possible. They haven't gotten that first punch in the mouth that comes with really trying to get good at something and accomplish something when life is going to get complex, it's going to get in your way, you're going to fail, you're going to embarrass yourself, all that stuff. So in that moment, you've got to make sure that you are going to push yourself through that, get out, and get to the other side. It is inevitable that in your pursuit of a goal that you care about, you are going to end up getting in a rut. In that moment, most people give up. I'm going to tell you what you need to do if you want to be part of the 8% that actually sees their goals through. You need to fall back on process. So many people want to fall back on motivation, but the reality is that motivation is not going to be there for you just the vast majority of the time. The vast majority of the time, you're going to be bored, things are going to be hard, you're going to be tired, it's going to be complex. And in that moment, you just need to run a process. You need to have habits that you can rely on to get you through. I've talked about them before, but just to recap, you want to make sure that you're cognitively optimizing. You want to make sure that you have your important things list. You want to make sure that you're doing things in order. You want to make sure that you have rules in your life that you stick to. You want to be leveraging your identity, that you're the kind of person that sticks with things. And then you want to have habits and routines that you're just going to loop around day after day after day that you know are moving you towards your goal. To get to your goal, it really is about persistence, consistency, metrics, so you know whether or not you're making progress, and then just running the physics of progress over and over and over. You have a hypothesis about how you're going to overcome the obstacle that stands between you and what you're trying to accomplish. You're going to do something to accomplish that thing, and you're going to see how much progress you made, which is going to give you more information for you to reformulate that hypothesis. If you fall back on that process, that is going to be the thing that carries you through. Never count on motivation, because motivation really does come and go. So make sure that you have an airtight process, and then everything else will fall into line. There are almost certainly a lot of things that you're doing that are going to keep you broke. The first is what we were talking about in the last question. It's all about financial literacy. Do you know how money actually works? As somebody who came to this game really late, I understand how easy it is to be educated, to be, dare I say, intelligent, and still not actually understand how money actually functions. And so you want to make sure that you're taking time to get financially literate. The next thing is, and some of these are going to be so basic and people don't do them, you need to stop spending so much money. Most people live paycheck to paycheck. Even people that are making six figures live paycheck to paycheck. It's something like 2/3 of people that make $250,000 a year still live paycheck to paycheck. So the goal is, instead of flexing on how much money you make, you want to make sure that you're living below your means. If you want to dramatically reduce the amount of stress in your life and set yourself up for success, you want to make sure that you're living below your means. Now, as you begin to live below your means, the first habit you're going to want to introduce is that you're going to start saving some of your money. So, of course, there's going to be an amount that you're going to allocate towards your living expenses, your house payment or your rent, your car payment, insurance, all of that stuff, food. But then you want to make sure that automatically you're saving money. If you're not automatically saving money, then you're walking down the path of remaining broke. So you want to make sure that you're living below your means, and you want to make sure that you're automatically saving money. Now, once you have saved up enough money that you have somewhere between 6 and 12 months of emergency cash on hand, if you get sick, if you hate your job, any of that stuff is exacerbated 1,000-fold if you're living paycheck to paycheck, because now you've got nowhere to go. There's no way for you to be able to weather that storm. And so it's what's known as a threshold event. Everything in your life may seem like it's going well until you hurt your back and you're unable to go to work for 2 months and you were living paycheck to paycheck and now you're in financial ruin. Or God forbid, you get a diagnosis and you end up with medical bills and you go bankrupt from that. That happens so frequently. So you want to make sure that you have 6 to 12 months saved up. Now, once you have 6 to 12 months saved up, now we want to start thinking about investing. Now, if you're not investing, you're going to be getting eaten alive by inflation. Now, a lot of people are not thinking about inflation. And the reality is, even in a good economy, you're looking at inflation being around 2%. Now, right now, as we're recording this, inflation is about 8.5%. So you don't want to count on it being as low as 2% because that's not always going to be the case. Now, the crazy thing is, most people don't understand what inflation actually is. So inflation is your ability to buy something goes down every year. That's the same as losing money every year. So imagine if you have $100. Inflation, if inflation is 8.5% like it is now, the next year, by the next year, because it's happening every day, by the next year, you don't have $100. Even if you saved it, didn't touch it, it's locked away in your bank account. You now have the equivalent. It'll still say $100, but that $100 now only buys you the equivalent of $91.50. Okay? That's inflation. So your buying power, even though the number stays the same, the buying power is going down. So as of right now, as we're recording this, you would need to make $8.50 every year in order to stay at the buying power of your $100. Okay? So saving money, even though I just told you to save 6 to 12 months, you want to make sure that you understand that you can't just sock all of your money away and think that it's going to stay. And this doesn't haunt anyone more than me. I get it, because investing is nerve-wracking. But if you don't invest, you're not going to be able to keep up with inflation. If you don't keep up with inflation, you're going to be losing money over time. And if you're losing money over time, that nest egg that you're going to hope takes care of you at the end of the day isn't going to be there for you. And so you really have to be thoughtful about how you invest. Now, I'm going to give you the most basic advice on investing. Now, why am I giving you basic advice? Because all the smartest investors in the world are saying, if you don't know anything about investing, this is what you want to do. And because I do not consider myself a good investor, this is the only advice that I feel like I can give you that's actually sound advice. And that is to invest in passive things. So you're going to be investing in ETFs, in index funds. Now, index funds are the easiest to explain. An index fund is a group of companies. So rather than you saying, I'm so smart, I know what companies are going to do well, I would say, don't do that, because even the smartest people that do this for a living have a hard time being right over a long period of time. Here is a fact that most investors don't want you to know. Most investors over a 10-year period are going to lose to an index fund. So the really smart people with all the algorithms, they're all going to lose to just picking a big basket of companies and investing in those and not touching the money. And then doing something called dollar cost averaging. So rather than thinking that you're so smart that you're going to beat the market, right? I'm going to time it. I know when the bottom is, right? Because the best advice on investing you're ever going to get is the following: buy low, sell high. Now, I don't mean that as a joke. That really is the best advice you're ever going to get. The problem is most people can't do it. And the reason they can't do it is they get emotional or they don't have enough knowledge. And so I see so many people making these big bets because it's sexy, it's cool, and when it hits, you feel like a king. The problem is the house always wins. And the odds of you on a long timeline winning like that are virtually zero. And Ray Dalio made this really clear to me. So Ray Dalio runs the largest hedge fund in the world. It's called Bridgewater and Associates. And he says, Tom, look, I'm spending hundreds of millions of dollars on research. I've spent probably even more than that building the best algorithms in the world. I have a talent pipeline where I'm recruiting the best and the brightest people from across the entire world. I have fiber optic cables that allow me to make transactions that are measured in milliseconds. And you're competing against me if you're trying to actively trade in the market. And so that's why people like him who understand how this system works are saying, for the average person, that's not the game that you want to play. The odds of you losing border on 100%. But if you go with something like an index fund, which is, there's one called the S&P 500. The S&P 500 is effectively the 500 biggest companies on the stock market. Now, the odds that you become one of the biggest companies on the stock market and stay there. You're going to stay there for something. I think the average company stays on the S&P 500 for like 16 years right now. Now it's been declining, but still, that's a long time. And the way that the S&P 500 works is when one finally gets down to the bottom and it gets booted off, then they replace that with another one. And so you always have the top 500 companies in the stock market at that time. And there's a whole bunch of different index funds. It could be growth stocks, it could be stocks in foreign markets, and whatever one you're comfortable with. But at least it's a basket of stocks, and you're dollar cost averaging in, which just means that every day or every Wednesday or whatever, you're putting in a certain amount of money that you want to invest. And you're just going to leave it. You're not going to panic when the market goes down, and you're not going to, when prices are up, you're not going to buy into the euphoria. Now, why would you not want to do that? The reason that you don't want to buy into the euphoria is because when people are euphoric, prices are going sky high. Now, in those moments, and I have now lived through my first cycle where I was really paying attention to the market and it got euphoric. So now I know what it feels like. And what it feels like is it's always going to go up, that you're a genius. You're making all this money hand over fist. Now, the good news is when it all crashed, I didn't sell. I didn't buy like a fiend, it was going up, and I didn't sell when it went down, which means that I don't have any realized gains or losses. Now, of course, when things are going up, if you want to take money off the table, by all means do that. You then bought low and you sold high. Makes all the sense in the world. But the last thing you want to do is buy like crazy as the price is going up and then panic as the price drops because now you've bought high and sold low. But that's what most people do because the euphoria is so exciting and people feel like, oh, there's no way that I can lose. And then when the bottom falls out, they feel like, oh my God, it's only going down. This is all going to go to zero. And the reality is it might. But if you follow the principle of never investing more than you can afford to lose, then you can ride out the market. And if you're in a passive fund like in the S&P 500, then it's just your dollar cost averaging. You're just buying at that steady interval. Now, when the price drops, you might buy more, right? If you know what a good deal looks like, hey, if the S&P 500 is down 20%, then maybe what I'm going to do is buy, instead of my $100 a week, I'm going to put in $150 or $200 if you have the capital to spare. Now you're getting things at a discount, right? I've heard it said, I think it was by Jaspreet Singh, that a recession is basically just a Black Friday deal for assets. Because now everybody's panicking, prices are falling, but if you've been passively investing into something as stable as the S&P 500, now you're just able to get more of that at a discount. It can be very advantageous. And this is why they say more millionaires will be made in a recession than in any other time, because all of these assets are on discount. Now the question is, what's an asset? And so this is another habit that keeps people broke, is they're not learning about money. They're not taking this time to figure out the difference between an asset and a liability. People are spending all of their money. Death habit number one, you're spending all of your money on liabilities and not assets. So the key is to understand what an asset is, to understand what a liability is, and to buy appropriately. An asset is something that when you buy, it's going to go up in value and not cost you money, or even pays you money, more money obviously than it costs you. If you have a liability, it's the exact opposite. So the classic example of a liability is a car payment. The second you drive a car off the lot, it's going down in value, and with very rare exception, it is never going to go back up. So it's going down in value, and you've got to keep making those payments. So you've got money going out while value is declining. Another one that people often think of as an asset, but is usually a liability, is your own home. Now, the reason that your own home is so frequently a liability is odds are you have a mortgage. Odds are it's the most expensive thing in your life. And it's not like you can just get out from under that liability, especially if the bottom falls out. You're going to have property tax depending on where you live, and you're going to have upkeep no matter where you live. So now you're pouring money into this thing, and maybe the value is going up, but maybe not always. And between the property taxes and the upkeep, you may be paying more then the value is going up over time, especially if you account for opportunity cost. So the odds of your house after taxes, fees, upkeep, all of that, being a better use of capital, if you're living in it, being a better use of capital than taking that same money and putting it into an index fund or something like that, a diversified portfolio, let's say, the odds of the house returning more on that are very low. Unless, obviously, if you get into rental properties and things like that and you're not living in it, so now it can actually generate cash flow, well, then it's just a math equation. This is how much I spend on average per month for insurance, property tax, upkeep, all of that. And if on average, the rent that you're getting is more than the money that you have going out, then it's very simple. Every month, I'm making more off of this property than I'm losing. Cool. Now you've got an asset. So that is the difference. If you're paying for something, it's a liability. If you're making money off of something, it's an asset. Now, most people don't have the discipline to buy assets because liabilities are usually the fun things. It's the cool clothes, it's the car, it's the fancy house, all of that stuff. And so people get themselves into a difficult situation because now the vast majority of their capital is going out. And this is how people end up in a position where they're living paycheck to paycheck. Okay, another thing I want to talk about that's a bad habit is that people are on a career path. Now, why is that bad, you ask? I have so many people around me at my company that are on a career path, and they're amazing people. But the people that really make money are the people that get so good at something that they can solve the most difficult problems that the company faces. So rather than thinking, oh, I am an editor, and so I'm going to get good at editing and I'm going to work my way up that way, you can basically predict what your salary is going to be. You're more or less going to get a 2 to 5% raise year over year. There'll be a couple times where maybe you're promoted into a role within that lane that has more responsibilities and therefore you get paid more money. But you can just look at that career path and say, what is the person that's the highest in this chain that I'm working my way up? What do they make? That's what you're going to make plus the sort of annual increases. On the other hand, if you look at who's the person in the company making the most money, full stop, now you begin to understand that just following that one career trajectory is not necessarily going to be as lucrative as solving those very difficult problems that the highest paid people in the company are solving. So I'll give you one example. If you want to get wealthy in a company, go into sales. I mean, that's just like the classic path to making money, because now if you're getting a commission off of what you sell, you're only hemmed in by how much you can sell and the price of the thing that you sell. So now you've got a lot more flexibility. So be very thoughtful as you're exchanging time for money. Don't forget that you also want to be in a position where you can exchange skill set for money, efficiency for money. All of those things allow you to break the basic time for money equation. And that is going to be far more lucrative. And now as you're making that extra capital, if you keep your costs of living low, now you're able to invest into those assets. And as you invest into assets, now you're kicking off either cash flow or you're building up wealth over time in something that can be sold for way more than you bought it for. Okay, if you do all of that, you can finally break these habits that are keeping you broke. There are certain habits that basically all wealthy people have in common that you guys can put to use in your life. And the first one is going to be the most controversial, but I could not feel more strongly about this. They make no excuses. They take total responsibility for their lives. In fact, many people that fall into that category will take responsibility for things that clearly don't even have anything to do with themselves. I have said many times, this is arguably the most controversial thing I've ever said, but I'm telling you, if you adopt this in your soul and act accordingly, it will change your life forever. You will become an unstoppable machine. If I, Tom Bilyeu, were hit by a drunk driver, I would blame myself. Not because I don't think that the drunk driver caused the accident, because blaming the drunk driver gives all my power away. And I can't do anything about them. I can't stop people from drinking. I can't control the way other people drive, but I can control whether or not I'm on the road. I can control how good I get at defensive driving, how much I pay attention and looking out, all of that. All of those things I control. So if you take control of your life and make no excuses, now you're in a solution-oriented mindset. And people that get wealthy, let me tell you right now, all they think about are solutions. How do I solve this problem? Because if you're wealthy, you must remember you're paid in direct proportion to the difficulty of the problems you solve. And if that's true, you better get very good at solving very difficult problems. And if you have something that's holding you back, like I'm not as smart as a lot of people, and that really pisses me off. But the reality is, pissing and moaning about it is not going to make me any smarter. All I can do is go make the most of what I have. I can go learn. Now, I could get pissed off at my mom. I could be angry at my dad. But the reality is that I am where I'm at from either how I was impacted as a kid in the developmental years, how I was impacted in the womb, my genetics, all of that stuff. But it's all done. The die is cast. There's nothing I can do about it. But there's 50% of my life that's completely malleable. And so I'm going to focus on that. And I'm going to, like other wealthy people, be obsessed with learning. You've got to be obsessed with learning. So you're not making any excuses. You take total responsibility for your life. And one of the ways you take responsibility for your life is even if circumstances are against you, even if you really have been dealt a bad hand, you know that you can get better at things. You have the only belief that matters. The only belief that matters is if I put energy and effort into getting better, I will actually get better. Now, why does that matter? Because skills have utility. Now, why does that matter? Because skills let you do something other people can't do. And that thing that it lets you do is solve problems that people want solved. What have I said like 8 times in this episode? That people will pay you in direct proportion to the difficulty of the problems you solve. So going out, learning, getting skills that have utility allows you to do things other people can't do. You're going to be able to get money other people can't get. That is something that wealthy people understand. Maybe it's not fair, but who gives a fuck? Nobody's coming to save you. Nobody's going to solve these problems for you. And if you're turning to people for a handout, all you will ever get is what they're willing to put in your hand. But if, on the other hand, you're willing to go, hey, what's the hardest problem you have to solve? I'm going to make that problem go away for you. And all I ask in return is money. And I'm going to ask the amount of money that's either equal to the exchange for you or less, so that you're tripping over yourself to buy this thing. And that is precisely how you end up breaking the time for money equation. Because wealthy people understand you just can't charge enough for your time in order to make it worth it. So as you can imagine, there are people that offer to pay me a lot of money for one-on-one coaching, but I don't do it. And why don't I do it? Because unless you're willing to give me equity in your company to do it, I just can't charge enough to make it worth the time. So you have to break that time for money equation. You have to be getting ownership in something. And that's another thing that people understand, wealthy people. That real wealth is going to come from owning something. You own something that other people consider extraordinarily valuable, that is going up over time. Now, the reason that ownership matters is because you want to buy low and sell high. The reason that entrepreneurs end up making a lot of money in success, obviously, is because they start with something that's worth nothing. And they get very clever and they build something that over time goes from worth nothing to worth whatever the market values it at. So to give you an example, in my own life, talked about this earlier, we took Quest from a product I couldn't give away, literally. I know that seems ridiculous now, but when we first launched, I would stand at trade shows and tell bodybuilders who ended up becoming like the most ardent purchasers of Quest, and I would say, free protein bar. It's a free Quest bar. I will give it to you right now. We didn't even, in the beginning, we didn't even ask for an email. All you had to do was extend your hand, grasp bar. That was the sum total of the payment that we were asking for. And people wouldn't do it. So we had to take it from figuring out the formulation, building out the manufacturing, all the things that we've talked about, convincing people to try it. And we went from that to something that people were willing to pay $1 billion dollars for. But in the beginning, it was worth nothing. And so the amount of money that we had to put in to get profitable, and then we reinvested all that money, and then ultimately we were able to sell it for that extraordinary sum of money. And it was a huge win, life-changing for all of us involved, because we started with nothing and we owned it and we built value in it. That's the key. You have to own something that goes up in value over time. So whether you bought low and you're going to sell high, or whether you were the one that created all the value, and so you didn't even have to buy anything. You just created value in this thing that later people wanted to own. So ownership is a huge key for people that end up generating wealth. You want to own, you want to hold. And so Warren Buffett talks about this a lot. Selling makes you rich, holding makes you wealthy. Now, what does he mean by that? If you want to sell something, you can get that influx of cash, and you will have whatever that cash is now. But now you're fighting against inflation, right? So you've got the money, but what the hell do you do with it? What are you going to do with it that doesn't allow it to get chipped away by inflation? You're going to have to find somewhere to put that money that's earning you more money than inflation is taking. And so that's why holding really becomes the ultimate play if you're holding the right thing, because it's going up, 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 up over time. And then you can either borrow against that, and this is something that wealthy people understand. You can borrow against your assets. You don't even have to sell them. You use the asset as collateral. You go to a bank, and let's say that your collateral, it is your collateral, but your asset is what I meant to say. Your asset is going up, let's say 5%, 7% year over year. And inflation is 2%. Or like right now, 8.5% is the current inflation. Hopefully by the time you watch this, that won't be true. And your asset's going up by 10%. So now you're in a situation where even though inflation is chipping away at most people's ability to buy, and whatever you have in savings is going down by that amount of inflation, you've got this asset that's going up more than that cost. Now, if you've got a bank that's willing to give you a loan with that asset as collateral, and the loan is, let's say, 3 or 4%, but you're making 5, 7% off of that money that you're either using to reinvest in your company or buying stocks or whatever you're doing. You have to be very careful buying stocks on debt, which I advise people not to do, but just so you understand how money works. Wealthy people that know how to use debt effectively, that's what they're doing. They don't sell the asset, they borrow against the asset. And as long as there's a delta between the cost of the loan and the amount that the asset goes up, you now never have to sell the asset. You can just keep borrowing against it. This is how real wealth is made, real generational wealth. So yes, you can sell the asset and you can make that money, and you will have to do that over time in order to pay back the loan and all that stuff. But again, there's a delta. So even as you're selling pieces, you're making more than you have to pay back. It's really crazy, and it's freakish how long it took me to understand even basic things like that. So trust me when I say I deeply empathize with people who are hearing that for the first time. So understand that. They understand they have to own something. They have to own something that goes up in value over time, and that they want to own something ideally that they can borrow against. And so that's how selling makes you rich, but owning and holding can make you truly wealthy. All right, those are the habits. If you follow those habits, you really can turn things around in your life. Be hyper careful about using debt. That's like the advanced level stuff. But just by way of making sure you understand how the system works, it can be a very powerful tool in the right hands. I know a lot of people are asking the question, do I have a spending problem or do I have an earning problem? Now, the great news is you've identified the only two levers that there are. You can either spend less money or you can make more money. Those are your two options. But I would say that most people have a problem with both. The odds that you're spending too much money are virtually 100%, unless you're really able to sock away money week after week, month after month, year after year. And so the easy way to figure out is how much money, more money do you have at the end of the year than you have at the beginning? And if that number is going up and it's going well, amazing. Now remember, the goal isn't just to save a ton of money. You want to save 6 to 12 months. Beyond that, you want to be finding a way to invest. Now look, there are certain economies, because I feel bad saying this right now, knowing that I have a huge portion of my wealth right now in cash. So some of this has to do with seasons. The reason is I think that we're in a very bizarre period of volatility right now that I don't expect to last. I am now beginning to look more seriously at different assets because I do think that things are relatively depressed right now. Be aware though, I am not a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. You should be very careful who you take financial advice from. So when it comes into the specifics, I would say go find somebody that knows way more about what I'm talking about. But just getting you to understand, I was feeling weird not admitting that right now I have a ton more in cash than I would normally. So anyway, there are different seasons. But for the most part, you don't want to have a bunch of money in cash. You want to have your 6 to 12 months, and then you want to have the rest invested in something that is very passive. You're not in there actively trading, going up against people like Ray Dalio. You're taking a basket of things. You're not trying to time the market. You're not trying to outsmart the market. You're saying, this is how I say it to myself. I'm not smart enough to pull this off. So I'm going to take a diversified approach to buying low, selling high. I can't time the market, so I'm going to dollar cost average in. And then I'm just going to make sure that my assets are going up over a long period of time. I'm not going to panic about little blips. So, and I'm talking like 3 to 4 year movements. So I'm not worried about something going down over a 3-year period. I'm just thinking, okay, I want to make sure that I have a very robust, diversified portfolio and that it's going up over longer periods of time. And just look at historicals. How has it performed historically? There are no guarantees, of course, but if something has done well over the last 100, 120 years, odds are that you can roughly count on something like that moving forward. And so that is the very basic approach that I would take. You want to make sure that at the end of the month that you've got more coming in than you have going out. And it really is that basic. And then just remember, there are 2 levers to pull. You can either spend less, which is always an option. Don't think yourself cool because you have a fancy car, fancy house, fancy watch, fancy clothes, none of that. I buy most of my clothes on Amazon. Obviously, I could afford a lot more, but I just don't tie. I actually do tie myself to my sense of style, which I actually do like, but I don't tie that to whether the clothes are expensive or not. And I remind myself constantly I could wake up broke tomorrow. So don't tie your identity to that. Don't be afraid to pull back your expenses. As Jaspreet Singh has said many times, if you can't buy something 5 times, don't buy it once. I think that is very good advice. So be super thoughtful about your spending and then go crazy on figuring out ways to make more money. Because personally, I couldn't live in a world where all I was doing was saving. I want to be excited about my potential upside opportunities. And so for a lot of you, figuring out a way to invest in yourself, to take a chance on yourself as either having a side hustle or being a full-blown entrepreneur will be the greatest journey of your life. Even if it doesn't end up paying off financially, it will be an incredible journey. And if you love it and you love that hustle, as long as you're not investing so much money into the bank that into the business that it becomes stressful if you lose it, then hey, that first one fails. Try again until you find one that succeeds. Successful entrepreneurs almost always have a litany of failures behind them. So don't stress yourself over that. Just make sure that you're in a position where you don't need a lot of money to survive, and then you can do a lot of cool and exciting things.
For those people who do, maybe they aren't aware or they understand but have so much dopamine and just like habitual of just going to TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, just scrolling for days to pass the time, to do whatever. How do you go about changing that behavior if you're already so entrenched in it?
I come down to one thing, George. Like, you're young, so I really want you to hear me. Your life is a confusing mess right now, and that will manifest as negative emotion. It's all going to pass. I've glimpsed your future. It all works out. It's amazing. Your life becomes wonderful because as you get older, you're going to gain control of your emotions. As you gain control of your emotions, you're going to gain control of your time. As you gain control of your time, you're going to acquire skills. As you acquire skills, you're going to be able to do things that other people can't do. Like, that really is the loop. And so as people get older, the reason that they tend to be happier and more self-assured is they realize the rules of the game, that you can just really get better at this stuff and you can get good. And so I want people to hear that. But my thing is, like, dude, you've really got to be obsessed with what you want to accomplish. And so if I could get you to understand, bro, all your dreams, that maybe the scale will be off. Maybe you want to be the greatest and you become, 1,142. But out of 7.4 billion, that's really pretty cool. And so that's going to be the ride of your life, but you have to get obsessed. And the only reason that obsession is fun is because you actually know you're going to make progress. It's when you're obsessed and things aren't going well and you don't realize it's just a matter of time. And so like right now, dude, I am really emotionally worried for people that don't understand the economy is going to turn back around. Wars end, like they're devastating. I don't wish it on anybody, but this too shall pass. It's like the great Buddhist phrase of all time. This too shall pass. If you knew that, yeah, the next 3 years are going to suck, but after that, it's going to be dope, man. And there's going to be a stretch of 7 years that are nothing but awesomeness. But then you're going to go through an 18-month period. One of your loved ones is going to pass away, and that's going to be brutal. But then you're going to have a stretch of 6 years. It's going to be awesome. Then you're going to have 4 years of just total suck. But through it all, you're going to be getting better and better at managing your emotions. So through it all, all is going to be well. That's the joy, man. And so the thing I'm always trying to get people to understand, you'll never get what you want out of life. You're never going to accomplish the things that you want unless you are obsessed. Obsession will hurt and it will be unhealthy unless you realize that you can get better. And if you value yourself for already being good, right, better, faster, stronger, life will be a misery no matter what. And so far better to focus on, did I leave it all out on the field today, right? So value yourself for how hard you went after something, not for what you accomplished. And then let yourself get obsessed with something because you'll get better over time.
And then with that obsession, what if it's an obsession with something that's not productive or unhealthy, like video games, for example?
Who said that's not productive and who said it's unhealthy? So there's only that which moves me towards my goals and that which moves me away from my goals. Now I'll make one caveat. Your goals should be honorable. I'll define honorable. An honorable goal is something that uplifts you and other people. That's about as simple as I can make it. So if you have a goal that uplifts you and other people, then why not go just absolutely bonkers to make it come true? If you want to be a professional gamer, then that's going to be playing a lot of video games. And I never would have believed this is true, but I enjoy watching other people play video games. It's fun. And so if that's the way that you want to contribute, that for people that want to watch you play, they can, amazing. So now it's uplifting you and other people. You'll be able to get into the passion loop so that you're both the shout and the echo, the shout being you playing, the echo being people enjoying watching you play. Or maybe you're like playing video games so you can help build video games, right? So there's many ways that you can do something like that. So I just want people to have an honorable goal and then ask themselves of everything you do, did this move you towards your goal? Yes or no? If yes, keep doing it. If no, stop doing it. And that's it. And that literally is the easiest way to steer. But people let things complicate that because their parents tell them that they should be doing something that maybe they do or don't want to do. They think that they should be making a ton of money and the thing that they love doesn't make them a lot of money. They want to be the best and they trick themselves into thinking this is only fun if I'm the greatest of all time. I will tell you right now, I play the video game Destiny 2 and I would laugh, I'm sure, if I saw the people that are spanking me. I mean, just embarrassing me, but I still love it. And so I try to remind myself that it's about getting better when I play because I love to improve. And it's just, video games are designed to squeeze the brain centers that evolution has given you for progression and goal acquisition and all that stuff. So it is a very fun microcosm. So I think people have to be very careful casting aspersions, moral judgments on any goal that is uplifting you and other people.
Do you think that there is a way to incorporate your passion, which could be video games, into purpose and also providing service and have that work for you? Or do you think you have to sacrifice one or focus on a certain thing first? Is there a perfect world where all three can exist?
I think all three can exist, but greatness makes demands. So hiding in that, meaning and purpose will all but break you because the world is constantly moving towards entropy. So from the moment of the Big Bang, everything is moving towards chaos. Now, when you introduce humans, Jesus, you magnify the amount of chaos 10,000-fold. I mean, it's just absolutely insane. We ourselves are complicated, bumping into all people that are complicated as well. And so to achieve something great, you are really going to fail a lot. You are going to run into more obstacles than you can count. But the problem is that fulfillment requires that you work hard, partly because that for humans to become the most dominant predator the world has ever seen, we had to be very good at ordering the world. To order the world, you have to pour a tremendous amount of energy to stop the chaos and move it towards order, because that's the other part of that equation. To bring order to a system, you must pour energy into it, literal energy. And so that's the battle that all of us are fighting against. And so if we know that meaning and purpose is the only thing that will ever serve you long term, that is how you get to fulfillment, and to do meaning and purpose, we know it's going to be brutally difficult, then the very thing that makes life worth living is going to be very hard. It will bring you to your knees. I have literally been brought to my knees. But as you get back up, which I encourage everyone to do, because we're all going to get brought to our knees, but not everybody's going to get back up. So if you get brought to your knees, don't worry about, that doesn't make you a loser, but it does mean that you're on your knees, and it does mean you owe yourself getting back up. Now, when you get back up, that's going to make you feel some kind of way about yourself. You can be like, yo, that didn't break me. That's incredible. So having meaning and purpose means, by definition, you are going to be brought to your knees at some point. You are going to fail to have the impact that you want to have in the world. And if you're ever going to have that and feel the way you want to feel, you have to get back up and keep going.
We've been talking a lot about like ambition and drive and getting your goals. I know another big part of your life is your relationship. So how does your relationship fit into your good life with your ambition? And how does that all cocktail work in your life?
The good life, how to live it. Step one, you're having a biological experience. What does that mean? You are an animal that's been shaped by evolution. The more you understand the organ of the brain, really the whole body, the microbes in it, all of it, the more you understand that biological system, the more you're going to be able to predict the outcome of your thoughts and actions. And so if you're trying to have a good life, one, you're going to want to define it, which I will say the good life is fulfillment. It's the only emotional state that is resilient to everything from anger, loss, and grief. Through all of that, you can be fulfilled. You may be devastated, and when you lose a loved one, it's devastating. It sucks. There's nothing fun about it. But that doesn't mean that I'm not fulfilled as a human. It just means that I'm a fulfilled human going through something brutal. Conversely, if I'm momentarily happy, but nothing is going right in my life, I'm not contributing in any meaningful way, I can laugh for 5 minutes and still be depressed. So fulfillment, I would say, is the only thing that's resilient. You're not going to be depressed and fulfilled at the same time. It's just not. Now that we have a definition for what the good life is, now we can actually begin moving towards it. Now, the reason I say that step one is recognizing that you're having a biological experience is I understand the things that are going to lead to fulfillment. One of them is working really hard. Another one is following or developing a passion that lets you contribute, that's number 3, to the group and to yourself. So if those are the rough ingredients that make up this cocktail of fulfillment, we have to figure out this idea of contributing to the group. What's that all about? That's about being a social animal. Now, what's the ultimate iteration of being a social animal? It is love. Now, why is love so potent? Because nature has one aim and one aim only. The reason you are a social animal is because of this one reason. The reason that you have drive and ambition is because of this one reason. Nature's only goal, this is it, this is the punchline of everything. Your motivation for sitting here right now, my motivation for answering these questions, the reason that we put these cameras together, built this channel, all of it is for one thing, because nature wants to make sure that you have kids that have kids. That's it. And now everything in your brain is nature pulling levers to make sure that you live long enough to have kids, and that you actually have kids. So love, which I will say is a neurochemical state, is nature's way of going, yo, I want to make sure you do this thing. So it's this incredible cocktail of, obviously there's different kinds of love. I will assume you mean romantic love since you referenced my relationship. So romantic love is like the thing. It is the thing that when you think about how people want to feel, in fact, when they have people describe how they want to feel and they look at that neurochemistry, you know what it most closely matches, even though this isn't the word that people put to it? Do you have a guess?
Like, looks like you're on drugs or something.
It's an orgasm. And so it makes sense that if nature's job is to make sure that you stay alive long enough to have kids that have kids, that the neurochemical cocktail of an orgasm be pretty high on people's list. So as people are describing it, they're like, oh yeah, that's the neurochemical you feel right after an orgasm. So technically it isn't the orgasm itself, but it's that cocktail afterwards. All the bonding hormones are secreted after that. You can actually predict, I don't know with what degree of accuracy, but I'm going to guess it is extraordinarily high, that you can predict who will stay married by the number of receptors that they have for, I think it's vasopressin, which is one of the bonding hormones. So there's oxytocin and vasopressin are the two biggest, the ones where it's like the cuddle hormones. So that's the kind of feeling over time that you want to have for somebody. Why? Because then you're more likely to have kids. And then you're likely to raise them long enough that they have kids. Because it's not just having kids, it's having kids that have kids. So you have to keep them alive. And all of the crazy things that nature does to do that are incredible. But nature only has two levers, pleasure and pain. And one of those tremendous pleasures that nature will give you that is extraordinarily resilient to suffering and loss and sadness and all that is that really deep love, not the early lusty stuff. That's super fun. But like that really deep, I have shared a life. I don't know who I am without this person. Love that you can have with another person if you're leveraging all of that neurochemical cocktail of soaking in the bonding so that over time, that sense of love is like nothing can touch it. Nothing can give me that, right? I've made a lot of money in a single day, right? 9 figures in a single day. I'll let people go put in a calculator 9 figures to see just how much that is in a single day, okay? It's a dope feeling. But it's not love. Love trumps everything I've ever been through in my life when it's sustained. And so I put a lot of energy into it, a lot of energy, because it gives me back more than anything else in my life.
So you mentioned how nature has programmed you to have kids who have kids, and you made a personal decision not to do that. Why did you opt out of what nature wants?
Why I opted out of it, we'll get to in a second. But the fact that we can all opt out is fun because I'm like, ha, I got you, bitch. It's like nature thought she had me, but I'm not playing that game. So here's the thing. I really want kids to this day. I really want kids. There are still moments where I'll see that thing that's like, ooh, man, it triggers all of my desire to have kids. And I'm like, man, I am very sad that I can't both have the life that I'm living and have the life where I have kids. But I looked at my life from several different vantage points. What my wife calls the average Wednesday. So what would an average Wednesday look like if I had kids? And I know myself, and I feel a tremendous amount of obligation. In fact, part of the reason that I work as hard as I do at Impact Theory is I feel an obligation to you guys. I feel an obligation to the team. And I take that seriously in ways that I think most people would be distressed by. And so for me, it's like, okay, I really need to think about that. If I had kids, I would feel a huge obligation to them to come home. And so one thing that I like about work is that I don't feel conflicted. Lisa and I are building it together. So as I put energy into this, I'm putting energy into something that I'm doing with my wife. So that doesn't feel like it's fragmented energy. It feels like it's coming together. That was obviously on purpose. I'm building a company that brings many of my passions, not all of them, but many of my passions together. So even as I pursue things that I would do no matter what, I'm also building the business. And I do that because I know I'm going to feel that sense of obligation. So let me make sure that I'm doing things that I love to satisfy that obligation. If I had kids, now when I'm at work, I would feel like I should be with my kids. When I'm with my kids, I should feel like I would feel like I should be at work. I just know that about myself, so I want to be really honest. And then you don't miss what you don't have. So it's not like I had a 7-year-old and they died. I just never had kids, right? So kids are a thought. So I can think, and I'll have those moments sometimes of really intense, like, oh, dude, like you see that moment, like, have you guys seen that TikTok trend where it's like they record, they do like there's a song and they like propose to their daughter and they have the daughter recording. She doesn't realize she's recording herself and she's like looking at them with like awe and joy. I'm like, oh God, like that hits me right in the feels. And I'm like, oh man, I want to have a daughter.
Or like the Jordan Peterson one, you know that one where they have like kids will not always be kids. They'll grow up. And
I haven't seen it.
And it's just like people videoing their kids going up from like a kid to like 5 years old.
Even hearing about that kicks me in the feels.
Yeah, uterus makes a somersault, like Lisa says.
Yes. Oh, yeah. My suddenly I have a uterus as well. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That kind of thing, like they really, really hit me. So, but anyway, I can set that aside because I'm like, my marriage is amazing. I fully understand nature's trick, which is when you have a kid, the child will be your number one priority. And right now, Lisa's my number one priority. I don't know that this is a stat, but I'd be willing to bet that relationships are more likely to break up or be dysfunctional. That's a better way to say it. Relationships are more likely to be dysfunctional if you have kids. So even people that stay together, I think it's a higher likelihood that stop being a very thriving emotional and sexual relationship if you have kids. So I'm super thoughtful about that. And then again, average Wednesday, I hate like doing things that kids want to do and stuff like that. I have so little time. It's like, I want to do the things I want to do. And then when I look back on my life and walk through all the different moments, because all of our lives are broken into phases, I look at the different phases. It's not until I'm in my 60s that I start to go, ooh, I think that having kids will like be pretty important to me. And by the time I'm 80, I will regret it. There's no doubt about that. But because I've thought through it, I'll know how to deal with that frame of reference when I get there so that I don't get destroyed by it. Because it's when people are caught off guard by a frame of reference. And explaining a frame of reference is beyond the scope of this conversation. But when you get to that frame of reference, you see life through that. And when you get caught off guard, like by having a kid and you didn't think through that well, or not having kids and you didn't think through that well, at last check, the most unhappy people in America are mid-30s female lawyers because they've chosen career over children and they are now at that moment where it's like, whoa, is this really what I want for my life? Now, maybe other occupations, they love it and it's not a problem. But for whatever reason, 35-year-old women attorneys, it's emotional implosion time. So that's somebody who did not think through what are the different phases of my life. Like it's dope in my early 20s where I'm like, yo, I'm proving I can do anything I set my mind to. I'm grinding, I'm making a ton of money. This is rad. And then you realize, oh, wait a second. Maybe there are other things that I didn't think through. But if you think through that and you're like, oh, in my mid-30s, I may want kids, but you know what? I'd actually rather play my career out. Now at least you're not taken by surprise. So you can plan around, okay, I better have a career that gives me those things. Thinking through that, I think, is very important. I know when I get to 80 that I will be very grateful that I thought through how my frame of reference will change. And so I will make plans to be able to mentor people, to have, in fact, I'm starting to do that now, even just in the way that I shift my own thinking about myself more as like a father trying to like, hey, I've suffered in my life. I want other people to learn easily what I have learned through great suffering, which is, of course, one of the things that makes being a parent cool. It's like, hey, I can help you hopefully make your life a little bit better. And so that part of being a parent, I can express in a lesser way. I'm very well aware of that through the people in the company, through the people that watch the content. So being aware of how the frames of reference shift is important. But anyway, that's how the way I've thought about pulling a fast one on Mother Nature to the extent that you can, but it's a trade-off.
And then the last question I had was, what are like 3 behaviors that you do to reinforce your love for Lisa that other people can put into their relationships?
Okay, so this is huge. 1, don't criticize, compliment. So when I was young, and you get together and you're in that relationship and everything is great, but then you start living together and like that super drug-like early days starts to wear off and all of a sudden it's all the things that they do that drive you crazy. And you're like, hey, could you not do that? You know, when you do that, it really bugs me. Hey, oh God, stop. Why are you doing it like that? And I was like, wow, when she does it to me, that drives me crazy. So I was like, you know what? Every time I have an impulse to criticize her, instead, I'm going to reach for a real compliment. I'm never going to lie. I'm not going to BS. But I'm going to reach for a real compliment. what that does is it pattern interrupts in my own brain. So I'm not reinforcing the negative thing, because it really is negative. Like the person really is doing something that drives you crazy. And it probably really is a dumb thing that if you could wave a wand to make go away, you would. And so it's not even like I'm saying that annoying thing isn't actually annoying. It is, but if I obsess over it, all I'm going to see is the annoying thing. Whereas that positive thing is also real. So I want to make sure I'm spending my time thinking about the positive thing. So don't criticize, compliment. Always make it real, but spend your time in the compliment. Have a lot of sex. Just real. Like even now in my 40s, it is so funny. In my late 40s, I can think back to what I was like in my early 20s, my poor wife. And like going through that and thinking, oh, it's going to be like this forever. It's not. Like as your hormones change. And I know that I'm only one testosterone injection from being right back there, but it feels more manageable. Whereas before I felt like a drug addict who couldn't focus, it's like now I feel like, hey, I have a healthy relationship with this drug. I'm a recreational user now instead of an addict, which is way better. And so being in that space though, I've realized it's still critically important. It is a thing that is unlike anything else in your life. It's the only person that you have that relationship with, if you're monogamous, and that's not an overvote for monogamy, but monogamy has a really potent upside. And so being in a monogamous relationship and knowing that that's my one outlet for that, you realize that sex is this fascinating thing that is a mode that we all go into. And going back to nature wants to make sure that you have kids that have kids, it's like nature made sure that that was an awesome thing that is unlike anything else. And so I'm legitimately freaked out by how much less sex young people are having now because they're missing out on something incredibly potent. Now, I'm only vouching for sex with connection. I won't say that it has to be a marriage, because I've had my share of non-marital sex and it was awesome, and I'm not denigrating that at all. But I've always found that it's way more enjoyable if it's somebody that you have a real connection with. So, but thinking about it like that, it is this mode that you don't get anywhere else. If you have a spouse and you have what they call bed death, that relationship is going to become dry and brittle. That's metaphoric, obviously, but that you'll get the right idea in your head. Whereas if you maintain a sexual relationship, you're constantly crossing this weird boundary into like this completely unique space that you only have with that person, and nature is squeezing this neurochemistry that constantly bonds you, brings you back together. So that's hugely important. I cannot stress that enough. And then number 3, you have to be a high-level communicator. You've got to invest in saying things that you don't want to say. And I think one of the biggest breakthroughs in my marriage was when I finally realized that I had to say out loud anytime insecurity was driving me, because then my wife could help me. And as long as she never weaponized the insecurity against me, now it's not my wife's problem to solve. Now, hopefully she can help me overcome that. That would be amazing, but it's not, she doesn't need to solve that problem. It's my problem to solve. But she can't weaponize my insecurities against me. And by me articulating them, now we know what's actually going on. So we're not arguing about a surface level thing. We get to the real issue that's driving it. We can both process through that together. And so now you don't have stupid fights that last forever. You're getting to the root cause of the issue. I mean, this is exactly like in medicine. Don't treat the symptom, find the underlying cause. But when you are arguing, you have friction in your marriage, you have to figure out the underlying cause. And I promise you, it's either a collision of values. So you both understand each other. You just disagree that that's how the world should be. It's misaligned base assumptions. So you are viewing the world in a way that you don't even realize you're doing it. So people don't realize what their base assumption is. It's what they call an axiom. You just live by it. Like, oh, I assume that emotion is very distressful for you. So why wouldn't you want to solve the problem? You assume that I know that it's not uncomfortable to sit in a negative emotion. Those are base assumptions. But in reality, my base assumption is you're in so much pain right now from this emotion. The only thing that makes sense is for us to solve that problem. And your base assumption is, dude, how can I solve a problem if I haven't had a chance to sit in it yet? But if we don't say that, I'm trying to solve the problem. You're like, asshole, just listen, right? And so when two smart people are colliding, they need to check their base assumptions first. Like, what's your base assumption? That I need to sit with this emotion before I can problem solve. I need to problem solve to even think straight. Cool, now we can begin to understand each other. So it's either values, it's misaligned base assumptions, or you've got an insecurity that's driving you and you either aren't aware of it or you're not being honest about it. And so if you get that stack right, then all of a sudden communication becomes very easy. But man, you've got to be emotionally naked. And that is very, very difficult, but it is hyper rewarding if you have a partner that doesn't use it against you.
So everybody sees how strong, your relationship is with Lisa, how amazing it is, how deep, but then also people see how amazing the career side of it is. Like your business impact theory is growing, it's thriving. And I just want to know how you balance that to keep both of them leveled up so evenly, to keep them both growing, and what your advice would be to people who don't know how to balance their relationship and their business or their work.
So if you want to balance things, you have to know thyself. So just a few days ago, I sent Lisa a text that hurt her feelings, and I didn't mean it to. I said, hey, would you mind if we did this business thing on a day that was special for her and I? And I even said, you're probably going to hate this idea, but, because remember, I feel a tremendous obligation to work for you guys and to make sure that the company thrives and all that. So I'm always thinking like, hey, this would be really good for the team. Now, Lisa's role, stated role, it's not like she would be confused. If she heard me say this, she'd be like, yeah, that's my role. Her stated role is to be the early warning system, because I don't see the problem coming in the relationship as quickly as she does. So we refer to it as being disconnected, where I work so much that we start to feel disconnected. So thank you for saying that people see my relationship as thriving, and I would say that it is, but it's because we have these bumpers. And I'll bump up against it, as I did just a few days ago. And I sent that thing and said, hey, let's do this business. I know this is that really special day for us, but let's do this because I think it'd be good for the team. And she said, hey, that hurts my feelings that you would even ask, because it makes me feel not heard and not understood, because 2022 was the hardest year of my business life. And for 8 months, she let me work 120 hours a week. That's not even getting a full night's sleep. That's working around the clock, 7 days a week. I mean, it's pandemonium, and I do not recommend it. I'm not proud of myself for doing it. It was actually a result of mistakes. Do I think I'm a badass for doing it? Yes. But do I think it was a problem of my own making? Very much so. So my wife was very understanding through that. Now, I promised her that I would find my way back to her, which I did. And so, but now she's very gun shy of like, hey, I gave you grace and latitude for 8 months. And now you want to do a work thing on our special day that makes me feel very unheard. Now, if either thing happens poorly in that moment, we have a problem. But Lisa and I do that movement well. She speaks up and says, hey, it bothered me that you even asked. And I'm like, oh, damn. Like, I don't like that it bothers you that I ask, because your role is to play that person where I can say, hey, let's do this. And you say, early warning, don't do that. So she had to be graceful in that moment and say, cool, I'm not going to double down. I'm not going to be angry. Let's not do that. As the early warning system, I'm telling you, we can't do it. And then if in that moment I'm like, yo, what the fuck? Like, come on, this will be better for the business. I thought we were in this together. Then she's going to feel abandoned in the marriage. So I'm like, hey, your stated role is to be the one to say, nope, that will lead to us feeling disconnected. And so when you say it, even though I have an impulse to go in the opposite direction and I'm not feeling disconnected, and that feels like a really small thing to me, that's your role, word. So I'm going to immediately back off, totally. I'm actually sorry that I asked, because I didn't mean to upset you. And I totally get where you're coming from. I hear you, like, we're on it. And so now we move on. I'm more thoughtful about, okay, fair, like the 8 months is pretty intense. I totally get why she's saying that. Next time I'm going to try to catch myself before I ask. But if I do, she's not going to be upset, but she is going to check it and say, you can't do that. So it's one, understanding it takes constant maintenance. There is no such thing as, oh, my marriage is great and it will remain great forever. My marriage is great because we work on it every single day. Now, balancing the business in that, it doesn't mean that I give more time to my marriage, because I don't. I give more time to the business, but it does mean that I prioritize my marriage. So if my wife says, hey, we can't do that thing, then we're not going to do it. Like, I will just tell you, the CFO pulled Lisa and I aside and was like, yo, 2 weeks of Christmas, crazy town, can't do it. And I was like, I'm just telling you right now, 2 weeks of Christmas every year from now until the end of time, because like the rest of my life, I make it about my business. For 2 weeks, I'm not a businessman, I'm a family man. It is what it is. And he was like, okay, cool. Like, totally on board. I get it. But that's one of those, you have to know, like, I need to do this set of 32 things to make sure that my marriage is always thriving. And they don't always mean the most time. Now, it's not an accident that Lisa and I build the company together. I would never be able to work as much as I do if we didn't. And I know this because the first company that when I got into entrepreneurship, for 8 years, she wasn't. And it was a nightmare. And even though I worked less, it was harder on the marriage than when I'm working more now, because we're in it together and we share, the same stories and the same people and wants and all that good stuff.
I read Feeling Great. You mentioned it earlier. And I might inflame the comment section by saying this, but I feel like if that book exists, then like why do people who read it don't suddenly oh, now I'm no longer depressed or no longer feeling anxious in that sense? Because he lays out all the steps very clearly. So what do you think is the thing that causes people to just not be transformed from reading a book? Is it the number 3 thing that you said early in the beginning, just not enough repetition? It just hurts the first time that they do it, so they don't follow through. What is the thing that the book
I think
doesn't work?
the big reason that people struggle to get out of depression, even if they've read a book like Feeling Great, is that one, they don't believe the following very inflammatory statement, that you can get control of your neurochemistry. And they think that it's all in the mind, and they don't realize that it's a far more complicated beast than that. But because they don't believe that they can completely get control of it, they will try a few things early on and stop. Now, if you have depression and you are not dealing with the body, your microbiome very specifically, then the odds of you getting out of that depression are virtually zero. And so even a book as extraordinary as Feeling Great is only dealing with the psychological component of depression, and it is far deeper than that. So your gut controls many of your neurotransmitters, and serotonin, so SSRIs are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, meaning they keep more serotonin floating in your body. Now, 70% of the serotonin in your body is produced and stored in the gut. So if the very chemical that they use to combat depression is in your gut and you're not dealing with your gut, now you have a problem. But it goes back to what I call the only belief that matters. If people don't think, oh, I can control this, then they won't keep going until they find that root cause. So they think that this is that thing that happened to me. A tragedy befell me, and therefore I'm never going to be able to get out of this. This is because of the trauma that I went through in childhood. Yes, partly, but you can get out of that. You can unwind that stuff. And I am not in any way, shape, or form saying this to be flippant. I am not trying to diminish the terrifying grip that is depression. I'm just saying you have to believe that you can get your way out of it. And yes, it is hyper complicated. And having watched Lisa go through an extraordinary battle with her microbiome and seeing how complicated it is to undo all that, the psychological side is already bad enough, especially if it's a result of trauma, abuse, where that gets hardwired in. I mean, that's in your nervous system in a deep way that is going to be very complex to unwind. But it starts with believing that you can unwind it. You can reboot your life, your health, even your career, anything you want. All you need is discipline. I can teach you the tactics that I learned while growing a billion-dollar business that will allow you to see your goals through. Whether you want better health, stronger relationships, a more successful career, any of that is possible with the mindset and business programs in Impact Theory University. Join the thousands of students who have already accomplished amazing things. Tap now for a free trial and get started today. And then doing something like cognitive behavioral therapy, where you go through, I forget how many, it's 13 steps, and one of the steps is the 15 cognitive distortions. I mean, it's crazy. So it is already a very complex book, just cognitively, psychologically, that takes a lot of repetition, which requires you to believe that it's going to work. But then it's also the very difficult part of getting your body right. Sleep, exercise, diet. You want to talk about, hey, let's really light the comment section on fire. Remind people that what they eat is going to influence their microbiome, is going to influence their production of serotonin, is going to influence their sleep, is going to influence depression, anxiety, all of it. It just is. And if you're eating junk food, you are making everything worse. Not a moral judgment, it's just a biological reality. Now, if you can strip away the moral judgment and realize you're not a bad person if you eat junk food, but you are a person that's creating obstacles for feeling good. So all I'm saying is remove the obstacles. Now, there are people in my life that I love that put every food obstacle in their way humanly possible. They are actively in pain, and they actively tell me how much they're suffering, and they actively ask me what they should do to stop suffering, and they keep doing it. Does that mean that I think they are a worse person? Not in the slightest. I love them just as much. I think they're just as valuable as a human being, and I really wish that they would remove the moral judgment from themselves, because it is not a moral question. It is 100% entirely a question of this path leads to one outcome, this path leads to a different outcome. Pick the path where you like the outcome, and then walk that path. And so people have to recognize I can do that it is cause and effect. There's nothing mythological about this. It's cause and effect, but it is hyper complicated. It is both psychology and physiology. Unwinding that will almost certainly require that you get help from professionals and other people. And so the shortest answer in the world to your question is it's complicated.
Just rewatch this episode.
But even that, now how do you go in and do, Lisa had me by her side, and it still took 5 years to get back to baseline with her microbiome. And man, when you're in the thick of it, the whole time you're asking, is this actually going to work? Because some days it doesn't feel like it. Some days it feels like this is going to be forever. And it's not until you look back a year and go, yeah, wow, that's right. I actually have 17 more foods that I can eat now that I couldn't eat before. But I still, 3 days a week, have just absolute agony in my gut. And so this still sucks. And then 2 years you look back and you're like, oh, wow, I'm only having that 2 days a week. 4 years in, you're like, oh, that's right, I only have it occasionally. And then 5 years in, you're like, God, this took a very long time. But there's a lot of dark days for somebody struggling with depression. But if you don't believe that you can unwind it, if you don't believe that you're in control, even though it's very complicated, then you'll never do it. And having been a victim of something would be horrible. But you now have to take control and say, okay, this sucks. I can't undo the past, but I always can control how I react to that thing. Don't take my word for it. Read Man's Search for Meaning. That is the ultimate form of abuse. He was in a concentration camp. So nobody's got a trump card to play on him, right? And his punchline is, it's all about how you process it emotionally.
So if you can share, in that 5 years, were there days that Lisa just did not believe?
Oh yeah. Well, they were the darkest days of my marriage. They were depression. They were me being afraid she was going to die because she was so sick. There was her being so fed up. I don't even want to try anymore. Why try? Why bother? There's no point. It's like, wow, that's hard. There were times where she would respond to love with just rejection and anger. It was like, what is happening? And so it was brutal. And we didn't know. I mean, you had to have blind faith that it was going to work. But did I know it was going to work? No. And there were times where even I was like, I have to act as if this is going to work. But I've never been through this before. And this is early, man. We as mainstream society have only known about the microbiome for 10 years. A year before Lisa got sick, I'd never even heard of the microbiome. So it's dude, this stuff is so complex that it does feel like a big question mark. But I will just say there is a solution to every problem.
Once you master this and realize that you don't have to stay in a bad job, that you can either leave or turn it into a rad job, and that there actually is a process to doing that, things will get a lot better. I've seen so many people live lives that they hate because we spend so many of our working hours at our job. If you don't love your job, yikes, it is brutal on the total quality of your life. All right, so let's dive into this topic and see what we can do to help you guys make the most out of whatever job you have. So the key here is recognizing that there really is only one path to success. And that is you're going to have to set the bar ridiculously high and then surpass all expectations. You want to really show people that you are capable of doing things that other people cannot. When you can outperform other people, and I know nobody likes to think this is a competition, but the reality is when you can do things that other people can't do, and if those things are valued by the company, you are going to move quickly through that company. Even if your boss is trying to steal your ideas, which I know is something that happens to a lot of people, if you really are the person that's coming up with the ideas and your boss wouldn't be able to get very far without them, you've got leverage. And so understanding that being able to outperform people is always the right answer. That's where I would focus. Okay, then the next thing is, so I've got this amazing skill set. Then the next thing is, when I'm always going to be growing my skill set day after day, 2, I'm going to take my job description and I'm going to say, all right, this is the stuff that I have to get done in the first half of my day and do it extremely well. And then in the second half of my day, I'm going to go find other projects that the company is trying to get accomplished, see what I can do to help other people, take on responsibility for projects that are beyond my job description, and then I'm going to do them just as well as I do my actual main job. People that do that are worth their weight in gold. Not only will you endear yourself to the people that you're helping, but when you go to your boss and say, hey, are there other projects that I could take on, maybe even things that are outside of the exact department that you're in, that's going to be a huge help. Almost every company is looking for people that show initiative and are able to be trusted with additional projects. And if you're in a company where they just aren't interested in that, they don't want people that show initiative, which, by the way, I challenge. I think if you put me into a company, even with strict hierarchies, even with political intrigue, all that stuff, that I would find a way to be useful to other people, that I would find a way to help other people. There's a quote. I'm going to paraphrase it, goes something like this. It's amazing what you can accomplish when you don't care about the credit. So if you don't care about getting the credit and you're just helping people, I think people are definitely going to take that help. Now, the key is that you make yourself indispensable to them. Once you're indispensable to them, now you have that leverage. And so being able to use that leverage to illustrate that you have a long track record of high-level performance within the company, now when you go and start asking for a raise, you're going to be much more likely to get it. And here is the secret to getting a raise. Go to your boss or whatever department it is that you're trying to move into and ask them, what would it look like? I want this title, or I want to make this much money. What would I have to deliver to you in order to get that? And if you get them to explain to you, like, hey, if you were able to do XYZ thing, that would be no brainer. I would definitely put you forward for that promotion. Amazing. Now you know exactly what you need to do. Now you just need to go make sure that you get the skill set that's going to allow you to do that better than other people. Now, my thing is, I'm always trying to reach beyond what I'm getting paid to do. Because remember, I started out as an employee, okay? I've not always owned my own companies. So when I was an employee, that's what I was thinking about. Like, I want to be indispensable. I want people to have fear of loss with me. I want them to be afraid that I'm going to leave because I am delivering so much value. I'm not saying that's not my job. Instead, I'm saying, what does a company need? And then I'm helping the company get that thing. And so when you're able to assess what problems a company is facing and help make those problems go away, you become extraordinarily valuable. When you're communicating very directly about what you want and finding out what you would need to do to get there, and then delivering against that, you're going to find yourself going up. When you're constantly helping other people with their projects and delivering a high level of quality and not asking for the credit for that, you're just doing it because you want to help people, while I have no doubt some people will take advantage of you, the vast majority of people will not, and you will find yourself meeting those people again and again and people wanting to champion you and lift you up. If you run that strategy, I'm telling you right now, you will be able to make things happen in your current company. What kinds of thought practices can I implement in order to approach my job differently? Okay, to really answer that question, I would have to know how you're approaching your job now. But the best way to approach any job is to, again, instead of asking what your job description is, to figure out what problems the company faces and what role can you play in helping make those problems go away. Now, the key to doing that is to really getting into a nitty-gritty tactical understanding of what the high-level goals for the company are, okay? So you should be able to find those out. And if your company isn't broadcasting those, you have another problem. But find out what your company's high-level goals are. Find out how your department has goals that are feeding into the company level goals, and then figure out what you can do on an individual level in order to help yourself or help the company achieve those goals. So there should be a direct line from what you're doing to what your department's trying to accomplish to what the company's trying to accomplish, so that you know as you're working on that thing that you're actually contributing in a meaningful way, so that you can point to something and say, hey, that thing contributed to this project, contributed to that goal, right? And when people can actually track your deliverables and they see the things that you worked on and how that fed into these very meaningful goals, that's how you begin to develop that fear of loss and get people to think of you anew. So as you're trying to think about your own job differently, you're trying to change the way that people perceive you. You want them to perceive you as a problem solver. And if you were to ask me what is one attribute that is just worth its weight in gold that I'm always looking for in any teammate here at Impact Theory, it is problem solving. I don't want to have to solve all the problems by myself. I don't want to have to come up with all the ideas. People often think that their boss wants to come up with all the ideas. I promise you, even if your boss is stealing all of your ideas, they don't want to have to think of them. And so you can make yourself indispensable and then leverage being indispensable to either get out from under a boss that's just stealing your ideas, to make it just undeniable that you're the one coming up with these ideas. But performance is always the key. Now, even if all you do is leverage that performance to get another job at a different company, being able to say, I did this, help with this, and this. And you can convey that in a way that makes it pretty obvious that, in fact, you were delivering a high level of performance because you can articulate it so clearly. You really are able to demonstrate that skill set. You have a free ticket to go wherever you want. But the key is, don't think of yourself as being bound by your job description. Think of yourself as being bound by your skill set, by wanting to put that skill set to use against the goals that the company have. When you do that, now you've got the right frame of reference for what your job is. What kinds of things can you do to balance your job and something you love without facing burnout? Burnout is a tricky beast. Burnout has a lot to do with the things that you, I won't just say love doing, but they have a lot to do with aligning the things that you're doing with things that give you more energy. So whatever it is that you're engaging with, you want to find a way to really engage with that in a meaningful way. And so there are a couple parts to that. So number one, you want to make sure that you understand the why that you're doing this so that you can attach meaning and purpose to it. When you've got meaning and purpose behind something, everything changes. Getting good at life, being good at your job, succeeding, paying the bills, all of this stuff is so hard that if you don't have a why that you're able to plug in, so I'm paying my bills so that I can support my family. All right, that's an incredible why, but you really want to think about that. You want to focus on that. And then the other is just making sure that you're able to engage with it in a way that allows you to experience progress. So getting better at something and moving forward in your life is one of the foundational pillars of human happiness. And so making sure that you are finding ways to engage with what you're doing in such a way that it allows you to be fed while you're doing this instead of having the energy stripped away. Okay, that's part one. Part two in all of this is making sure that you understand an idea that a lot of people, myself included, who like to be ultra hardcore, have to really learn, and that is doing less is always an option. Okay? Doing less is always an option. So if you're starting to feel burned out, you need to pump the brakes. And I always tell myself, I don't do overwhelm. Now, I don't say that because I can carry an infinite weight. I cannot. I have my limitations just like anybody else. But the reason that I don't burn out is because as I feel myself getting close to my limitations, I don't tell myself, like, come on, like, you can do anything, just keep going. Now, I am hardcore. I'll be the first to admit that I make sure that I'm leaving it out on the field, that I'm playing as hard as I can. But I make the demand that even hard work is done in a joyful manner. So I am at all times pursuing fulfillment in a joyful manner. It just so happens that fulfillment by nature is working really hard to gain a set of skills that allow you to serve not only yourself, but other people. Okay, working really hard, that's part of it. That's a directive inside of our brains given to us by evolution. So you have a directive in your brain to work hard. And if you don't work hard, there will be a sense of dis-ease in your life. You won't feel right. Something will feel like it's missing. You won't know what it is. You will be grasping for something. And it will seem like it's going to be a thing you need to get to attain whatever, when in reality, you need to work hard. That working hard, there's a reason that working out leaves you with this amazing feeling. Nature had to incentivize that you would work hard. Because going out, hunting, foraging, protecting your family, all of that stuff was brutally difficult when you go back hundreds of thousands of years. And that's what we came up through. And so nature only has two tools, pleasure and pain. If you're doing the right things, pleasure. If you're doing the wrong things or not doing something you should be doing, like working hard, then walloped with pain you get. So that's a key. You want to be working hard towards something that matters and allows you to serve not only yourself, but other people. When you start doing that, now all of a sudden you're back in that energizing mode and you don't have to worry about burning out. But working hard is a key part of this. But when I get to the point where it's like, all right, I'm really working hard, but I'm now reaching a limit where even with all the meaning and purpose and all the joyful pursuit of fulfillment, I'm now reaching a point where this isn't fun. You need to acknowledge that and back off. That's not the time to keep pushing, right? You needed to gut check yourself. You needed to make sure that you weren't just being lazy. But when you realize, I'm not being lazy, this is just not fun. I'm now at a point of diminishing returns. You need to be honest about that, acknowledge it, trust yourself to have busted your ass, that you don't just grab for the, oh, woe is me, I'm exhausted. It's like, no, man, I've really played hard. I've really gone after this. I've made sure that there's meaning and purpose. I've made sure that I'm pursuing fulfillment. I've made sure that there's progress in my life. But now we've hit a point, it's not enjoyable. Back off. Relax. Take a Tuesday off. Meditate daily. Find some way to get calm and creative. Prioritize your sleep. Make sure you're eating right and exercising. All of these things matter a lot when it comes to burnout. So be very thoughtful that even something that you love, that you recognize, there can be a point where you just need space. You need a minute. You need to take some downtime. And that you actually allow yourself to take downtime. But that you're checking yourself to make sure you're not just being lazy. I'm not in love with my job, but I have no dream or passion to succeed further. I don't know what else to do. I feel like this job has taken all creativity and imagination away from me. What do you recommend for someone like me? All right, so first and foremost, we are going to have to figure out what exactly has happened. So is it that you don't have a dream or passion because you haven't taken the time to define that? Because let me be very clear. Passion is not an archaeological dig. It's an architectural build. So you don't turn inwards, look inside yourself, and find this glowing ember of passion and excitement that's been sitting there since birth, despite that some people will tell you that that's how this works, but it is not. If Steve Jobs were born 1,000 years ago, he would not have dreamed of making the iPhone. What ends up happening is you decide. There is something that you decide means enough to you that you're going to invest in it. And then over time, that investment turns that thing into a deep and abiding passion as you get better and you get feedback from the world that they value this thing that you're getting better at. But it isn't just lying dormant within you. And this is like the number one confusion that I encounter with people is they think that either they're broken and other people were born with a passion and they were not, or they just think that, if I do enough introspection, I'm going to find something sitting inside of me. And finally, my life will be amazing. Once you realize that, in fact, what happens is when you look inside, all you're going to find are these sparks of interest. And from that spark of interest, through pursuing it as a process of gaining mastery, it will become a passion when you're able to use that skill set that you gained in the pursuit of mastery to serve not only yourself, but other people. Okay. So doing that, now you're in this passion loop of you worked really hard, you gained this set of skills, allows you to serve other people. They give you feedback. Oh my God, thank you. This is so amazing. I'm grateful for what you've done, built, created, given me, whatever the case may be. And that feels good, which makes you want to go get better. And that's the passion loop. Now, as you're doing that, you're able to really be energized by the things that you're doing. But it doesn't start by looking inward and finding something. It starts by realizing that you have to fan those flames of that spark of interest to turn it into the raging inferno that you want to feel of that passion. But that comes from that loop. Okay, so that's the first thing to assess. Now, if you already have or had a passion, but this job has somehow beaten it out of you, that's a very different story. And so if that's what's going on, we need to figure out what is it in the structure of that that is robbing you of that. What's going on exactly that's making this overwhelming or stressful or not fun? Is it politics in the office? Is it just the work environment is too fast paced? Is it that you're not being honest with yourself about, going back to this idea, 50% of you is hardwired, 50% of you is malleable. If the hardwired part is out of step with the life that you're trying to lead, there can be a lot of frustration there. So having the self-awareness to understand, did you put yourself in the wrong position? Are you trying to be Steve Jobs when you should be Steve Wozniak? That's a really imperative thing to look at. Now, I find that a lot of times companies have their own issues. Whenever you get a large group of people together, there are going to be weird things that have to be navigated. But at the end of the day, while you can't control everything that everybody does, you can always control how you react. And so you can reorient yourself within a company to figure out, one, if there's a path back to finding that joy, but that comes from breaking down what exactly happened that made you stop feeling the joy. And two, are you able to perform at a high enough level that you're able to create the space for you to get back on track? Because if you're going to go in and try to move things around and make some changes within the company or within your role or within how things work, you're going to need to be performing at a very high level to have the credibility to make that ask. And this is where it gets difficult. Nobody wants to hear this. I get it. Everybody wants to point fingers and say this is just a toxic company. But in reality, if it's that bad, leave. Do not waste time. Find another job first. I'm not just saying quit. Find another job, but get out of there. Don't act like you're actually in prison. You are not actually in prison. And yes, I understand that you have obligations and you may be a single parent with kids and huge responsibility. I completely understand. And I have the most empathy for that in the world. But I want you to understand, you are only as trapped as you allow yourself to be. If you have a useful skill set, you will be able to find another job. And now is the time to go looking for that while you're still getting paid. Now, if you don't have skill set that's marketable, that's where we have to start. And so building up the skill set so that we can be marketable somewhere else, that's going to give us the ability to perform where we are or leave if it's too toxic. But assuming that we're going to stay, now we need that skill set to perform at a very high level, to create the credibility, to make the ask and go to your boss or whomever is creating, or maybe not even creating the problem, but who has the ability to help you create the solution. Now you go and say, I'm performing at a high level. Yes. Oh my God, you're amazing. Okay, cool. Here are the things that I would need to change. So often people's first instinct is just peace out. And they don't realize that there are many things that they could have done to restructure the role, to create more space for themselves in order to stay. But what people end up letting happen is they let themselves burn out and then they want to leave and go somewhere else, not realizing that they will have the same problem at the next job. And instead of doing the work themselves, solving the internal problem of how we ended up here, whether it's lack of skill set, not setting boundaries, whatever the case may be, but keeping that ownership, keeping that responsibility, recognizing that if you make different choices, you get different outcomes so that you can go ahead and change things there. Now, again, if you want to leave. By all means, take your skill set and go elsewhere. But make sure that you're not doing what I was doing in my early 20s when I was about to move to New York because I was unhappy in LA and I thought that LA was the problem when in reality it was my mindset. Once I changed my mindset, suddenly LA was amazing because it wasn't about LA. It was about me. And I thought, like something's got to change. And so I just wanted to go as far away as I could. but it wouldn't have solved the problem. I would have gotten to New York only to have the same issue again and again and again. I had to address my mindset. And once I did that, then everything changed. So be very careful, be very thoughtful about how you approach unwinding this problem. If you're always blaming other people, you're not going to get where you want to go because you're not looking for the things that you can do differently. You're letting your psychological immune system take over, make it other people's problems, and then you're not able to change. And once you realize that your life is an exact reflection of your choices, now it's not so you feel bad. It's so that you remember if you make different choices, you get different outcomes. And so now you can make these changes or gain more skills or whatever it is that's needed to get the life that you want. Now, no matter where you go, you will feel completely comfortable that you can shape things to your liking. But you have to know how the game works. You have to know that building skill set is the key. You have to know that communicating with your boss, what's working, what's not working, and to have earned the credibility to make the ask. Do all that, you'll have no problem. I have financial obligations to stay at my current job. It has made me feel more depressed than I can say. How do I find purpose and fulfillment in a job like this? Okay. We have to figure out why you're feeling depressed. Is it your financial obligations? Is it that you hate this job and really the question you should be asking is, how do I find another job? So let me ask you a question. Have you ever written down in a single sentence what your ideal job is? I find that oftentimes the reason that people's lives are not what they want them to be is because they lack clarity. There's a great Tony Robbins quote. If you don't know where you want to be in 5 years, you're already there. That one hit me so hard the first time I heard it. If you don't know where you want to be in 5 years, you're already there. Where you are now is where you're going to be in 5 years, 10 years, because you don't have the clarity to steer towards something else. Because ultimately, this is a steering problem. We have to know where we want to go. We have to figure out, how did we end up here? How did we end up in a job that we hate? Is it that we chose the wrong job? Is it that we let ourselves be the boiled frog, where it was just, well, that decision wasn't so bad. Okay, that I don't love that, but whatever, it's fine. And it's just day after day, month after month, year after year. It's things like that where things have gotten worse. You never set boundaries. You never push back. You didn't gain new skills so that you could demonstrate that you're capable of more. You didn't take on additional responsibilities and carve your own path through the company. Are you waiting for people to come to you and tell you, hey, you should apply for this new role? A lot of times people are waiting because they don't have the clarity. Or a lot of times they're afraid to go after it. They know what they want, but they either haven't built the skill set or they're so afraid of rejection that they don't even try. On that, you're going to have to build some, I won't say fearlessness because you're going to be afraid, but you've got to be willing to embarrass yourself. You've got to be willing to fail. Like you've got to be able to sit in failure and be okay with it. Because let me tell you, the people that end up succeeding are not the ones that just never make a mistake. They're the ones that aren't afraid to make a mistake, or they're certainly not paralyzed by it, right? There's that amazing Michael Jordan commercial where he's talking about, I've missed this many game-winning shots and I've failed this many times. And it's because I have failed that many times that I've had the successful career that I've had. Now, that sounds counterintuitive. So you need to understand what's really going on. What's really going on is that you have to be willing to take those risks. It isn't that you will never fail. It's just that you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. You are guaranteed to stay where you are if you never try to reach for anything more. A guarantee. It is a guarantee. It's guaranteed. You're never going anywhere else. If you don't try, you are never going anywhere else. It is 100% guaranteed. So, you're going to embarrass yourself. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to look stupid. And if you can emotionally deal with that, then you'll actually get better, because every attempt that you make, you get a little bit better. At least if you're willing to be honest about the ones that failed, why they failed, own that responsibility so that you understand next time I can make a different choice and get a different result. You do that enough, it's what I call the physics of progress. You take your best guess, you try it, fail to some degree, improve, start over again, try something new, fail to some degree, and you just keep iterating like that until you get better and better and better and better and better, and you make that progress. That's really the key. But you have to do the work. You have to be honest with yourself. You have to take responsibility. You have to keep trying. You can't give up. If you hate your job and you want to find fulfillment and you want purpose, you also have to assign meaning and purpose. Like a passion, there is no meaning and purpose hiding inside of you. There are things that you care about, for sure. And your goal is to look inside of yourself and to find one of those things that matters to you and say, I'm going to make this really matter. I'm going to make this the meaning and purpose behind what I'm doing. Now, again, if you haven't read the book, Man's Search for Meaning, read it. Viktor Frankl talks about exactly how you assign meaning and purpose to something so that you can suffer and go through difficult things, all the while knowing why you're doing this. Why am I doing this? When you have a compelling answer to that question, you will move forward. If you don't have a compelling answer to that question, you will not move forward. So we're going to make sure that we figure out how we've ended up here, why we're depressed, and then we're going to assign meaning and purpose. We're going to work to get the skill set that we need to make progress towards this thing that matters, right? Because it's not enough to just have something that matters. You've taken the time, you've assigned meaning and purpose to this thing that you're doing, but now you actually need to make progress towards that. And that's all about skill acquisition. So this requires you to be very honest with yourself about how you ended up here. Retain your power by really looking at things from what did I do to end up here versus making this somebody else's problem. Oh, it's a toxic work culture. The environment here is terrible. My boss is an idiot. Even if those things are true, don't waste any time with that because you can't control that. What you can control is what you do, how you react. So focus on that, assign that meaning and purpose, get the skill set you need in order to make meaningful progress towards that, and it will turn you around in terms of how you feel. And then remember, you can always leave. So if your work really is that terrible, then go somewhere else. Just don't forget that all of your problems are going to follow you. So solve the mindset issues first, and then see how that manifests.
Every time something goes wrong in my life, I am asking myself one simple question. What is it that I suck at? I suck at something. There's something I'm doing wrong. By definition, if I were doing it right, then I would be getting the outcome that I want.